at it and keep them in. So I guess I'm appalled that we are using our out of district placements as an example. And I guess I'm also upset with the fact that there really is no budget line to see what else is that. I don't have the exact figure. I only know what people have been saying in the press. But I really hope that you ask people why we're placing, and not because of financial. Because what is morally right is to keep your children in the classroom with their peers. So when they're at the shopping, at Walmart and being a greeter, they actually know how to greet and know people they're going to be greeting. When they're working at the pushing shopping carts at Demoulas or at Market Basket, people are going to say hello. And if you put them in out of district placement, that's not going to happen. And they're going to come back worse than when they went. So I think you really need to think about your special ed. You're one of the only districts in the whole state that has a special ed attorney in-house. I've always had a problem with that as a counselor, past counselor. But I ask you to really look at your program. And that should not be a reason why the budget is going up. Your insurance should be a reason. The fact that you've had to deal with social workers or mental health should be a reason. That's fine. The fact that you are, there might have been a problem somewhere and you might need to add teachers because of moving kids around your district. That could be a problem, or that could be a reason. But to say special ed is a reason, I have to ask, what are you doing for your children? And so I would ask you to really look hard, really think about that. And if that is your biggest reason for a budget increase, then you really need to say to your director and the people involved, what are we doing to make a change? Because those kids do not need to be going out of district placement. But first of all, there's not many placements out there. And if they're court placed, then you know they're going to be $67,000 right now. Because anything above $67,000, the state will take care of. So if you're paying $250,000, which I heard, now it might have been gossip, or if you're paying $180,000, which I heard, again, might have been gossip, but I don't have the actual figures, then I have to ask, why? Now, if you have a senior that has schizophrenia and is out of control and is violent, that's a different story. In the 17 years, the last time I had a child 17 years ago, was because of that. And I get that. But for the average child, they do not need to be placed in out of district placement. And the out of district placements, I would encourage you as a board member to ask your director and go and take a look. You would be appalled at what you saw. So I just ask you to get the budget online so we can take a look. That's not online. And I would ask you to stop making special ed your scapegoat and really look, if that's a problem, then the mayor used it as his first term last night and in the press, other people have used it in the press, then I think you need to look within and say, why? Because that is something that can be fixed. Thank you.
Point of order. Are we doing 3-minute public comment?
I'm sorry.
This is a public hearing.
hearing.
So there's unlimited talk time? Okay, because I just was a little concerned with, last meeting, I think was public comment and Counselor Cook came up and talked well beyond 3 minutes, so I just want to be aware of that. Thank you.
Good, 2A South Street. So this being the final public hearing, my expectation, and I waited and I looked for the detailed budget, which is required by the charter and by the admin code. So I do believe that the taxpayers deserve to see where their tax dollars are going. And looking tonight, coming in, it appears that you have a budget. And generally, at the last 2 meetings that we went to with the police and the fire, something was prepared and it was available to us as residents to see what's going on. So I guess my question would be, when do you expect to put a detailed budget out for the public to review? Because this is not, basically, this is not how it works. The charter departments are no different than the rest of the departments in the city. So my expectations, and from the data that's been put out previously, I've compared it to Dover. And a Dover report provides a clear revenue and expense summary, including line items between the FY 25 estimate and their proposal. It also includes all your actual expenditures, your adopted budget, your proposed budget, and the differences. I have a copy if anybody would like to see it. It's very complete. I have a lot of questions on what was going on. That's why I planned on attending this. I'd like to know the financial impact of the redistricting. What happened at Dondero? What happened over here at Little Harbor? How is it affecting us? Why is our budget still going up when we're trying to address all of these issues? I also have a question about the way the approach was taken to put this out there in the public. In looking at what I would expect the school board and the superintendent to do wouldn't be to look at your teachers and your core principals first. I would think you would look at your admin staff and all of your support staff before you go to cut teachers. Teachers should be the last thing that you would look at. So that was very upsetting to me, and obviously by the council meeting last night to everybody else. And I don't know if that is just one of those things that was done to gain attention and call attention to this, but that was, to me, that was very disheartening. The only other thing I would like to know is, and I can't talk about, I have some suggestions for efficiency and cost saving opportunity, but I can't talk to that because I haven't seen anything. So I hope that if you're going to approve this budget, it will be online and it will be available for somebody to comment and come in and speak to you about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Christine Burke and I am the K-12 Wellness Coordinator for the district. And I live in Madbury, New Hampshire. I'm here tonight because I felt like I needed to share some information with you regarding the position of the Wellness Coordinator. And so I was told a week ago, right before vacation, that my position was potentially to be cut. And after all of the messing around with the people taking buyout, my position still sits at the top of the list for being cut. So last week I shared a letter with Dr. McLaughlin and I have not had a response to that letter. So I felt it was important that I come here and I share that letter with you. Dear Superintendent McLaughlin, on Friday, February 21st, 2025, you notified me that due to budget constraints, my position at K-12 Wellness Coordinator was in danger of being eliminated. That announcement actually took me by surprise because of the district's priority of being wellness. I have always understood that my position was unique, especially as it is encompassed within the teacher contract. It is also a position, however, with great capacity, especially as it pertains to the implementation of the strategic plan. Over the weekend, I watched the school board meeting from February 18th, where you explained to the board how the assessment of teacher positions was conducted through the use of a survey and a matrix of value assigned for three main components: years of service in the district, certification, and other district-wide efforts, of which the individual teacher was involved. It was at this point that it struck me, comparing my work against that of a classroom teacher was analogous to comparing apples and oranges. It was this information that the administrators used to determine which positions would be potentially cut. No individual in the district can articulate the value of K-12 Wellness Coordinator position better than myself. Even administrators would only be able to assess this value through a nexus to their building. Because of competing priorities and evolving needs, elementary principals would rate this position value as low today. Since for the past 2 years, I have had little work directly related to their buildings. But if elementary principals were tasked with rating the position value and contributions from 2020 to 2023, when the priority was managing the district-wide COVID response, which included but not limited to policy development, acquisition of PPE, COVID tests, and inoculation events to enabling public-private partnerships such as with Convenient MD. Within most buildings, the assigned value of this position would have been marked on interest. When I began in 2018, this position was immersed in a great potential. Indeed, when collaborating with other school districts, it has been commonplace to hear how positively impressed others are that Portsmouth demonstrated such commitment as to fund a position dedicated to student wellness. What I brought to Portsmouth was 35 years of experience that range from teaching every grade level from pre-K through 12 and up through higher education in the areas of health promotion and disease prevention. My 2 decades in the higher education industry mirrored those challenges inherent to Portsmouth School District, using data to identify factors inherent to student health and what impact that they have on the capabilities to learn. Moreover, it is through this position, identification and implementation of evidence-based programs are proven to address those needs. In 2019, the school board identified the significance of focusing on student well-being by adding the 4th pillar to their goals, guiding pillar number 4, student wellness. Indeed, such was the occasion for the 4th mast to be depicted on the district clipper ship logo. Guiding pillar 4 was to be established to address social emotional learning needs and the impact of trauma on child development. I led the team that vetted and selected Character Strong SEL curriculum that is now being utilized at our elementary schools and Portsmouth Middle School. I'm also a Master Certified Adverse Childhood Experience, ACE, trainer. Such a qualification allows me to facilitate trainings that surround the impact of adversity early in life, further deciphering how such circumstances contribute to childhood neurodevelopment, and thus providing insight into students' ability to learn. Furthermore, I have dovetailed this acumen with complementary trainings on the impact of positive childhood experiences, now known to reduce the impact of ACEs. When we returned from COVID, brought clear indicators of high mental health needs. I was one of 3 individuals in the community who initiated the Greater Portsmouth Youth Wellness Coalition in the fall of 2022. The coalition was intended to bring together all of the entities in the community that were working in silos, yet all have been pursuing a similar target, student mental health. More than 20 organizations now participate in that coalition. Members include the New Hampshire Juvenile Teen Diversion Program, the Portsmouth Youth YMCA, the Arts and Reach Program, and WSCA 106.1 FM Portsmouth Community Radio, to name just a few. The coalition applied for and received a federal drug-free community grant in 2023. The grant, which really selects districts on their first application, provides the community with $125,000 per year for up to 5 years, with an option to extend such award for an additional 5. This translates to potentially $1.25 million over the next decade for directly impacting youth mental health and substance use in our community. Following the 2024 summit hosted by yourself and fellow superintendents at ADVAC for the purpose of spearheading more creative and collaborative work between the districts, 2 staff members, 1 from each district, came away from that experience with a commitment to address the impact that cell phones and social media were having on our student mental health. Subsequently, these summit leaders connected with me, and I found and primarily offered the competitive grant proposal to the Foundation for Seacoast Health. We were fortunate to be awarded $40,000 to develop a program designed to respond to that need. I was already aware of and connected to that funding foundation through the coalition. The aforementioned only speaks to some of the work I have already accomplished. It doesn't begin to address the potential that I have in moving forward some of the district's priorities identified in the strategic plan. Focus Area 3, student safety, well-being, and belonging. I serve as a liaison between the schools and the community. I serve by recommendation of the previous board chair, Christian Jeffrey, as a member of the advisory board to the Seacoast Y. I also serve on the steering committee for the coalition. Student-driven initiatives such as Getting to Y, Youth to Youth, and Leaders in Prevention were brought to the district through my efforts and no additional cost. Finally, I'm currently coordinating the implementation of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey at both the middle and high school. This data is identified as a vital indicator within the strategic plan. With regards to data on certification, the state of New Hampshire does not have a certification for wellness coordinator, nor was it a prerequisite for my employment. I do, however, maintain a Master Certified Health Education Specialist certification through the National Commission for Health Education Credentialing. I told you in our meeting on February 21st that this is not the first time I have had to advocate for my work. Indeed, I've spent. Indeed, I've spent 40+ years working to advance personal well-being within the infrastructure of education. I would be more than remiss if I did not take the time to convey to you. I'm sorry. The school board and the district, what would be potentially at stake should a move toward eliminating the district K-12 wellness coordinator position be realized. Respectfully, Christine Burke, K-12 wellness coordinator. Thank you. I think the data stands for itself, and I guess I'm not looking for much. I'm just asking that this group reconsider the proposal that includes this position to be eliminated, because it's not about, yeah, it's my job, so conveniently, but it's also my job to be here advocating for this. So I ask consideration of that request. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Hello, Greg Abear, at 183 Hillside Drive. First, I think probably should apologize a little bit for the message. I think some of this probably is for the city council, but I think important to know how I want to make sure my family's voice is heard in front of this group as well. I think we all know every community has a budget, and that how we spend that budget reflects what we value most. From in looking at I can't help in my own experience see how a city assessment has become a shadow over the educational budgeting process. And it's real, state mandated, every community has to do it. But when I look at that and I say, property values go way up, but taxes, nobody's got extra dollars, and I get that. But when we say a citywide assessment, then we say, well, where can we cut because taxes went up? My own philosophy is I don't understand to say, well, let's turn to our largest items and say that's where we should cut. Because you're saying, well, let's turn to education and cut because it's a large item. That doesn't make any sense to me. So a little bit of the personal background is I was a high school teacher for 8 years. And so I've had a little bit on that side of the world as well. And I understand some of the intricacies of that. It's been a while, but I do understand part of that. And now I am on the other side. I have 3 students enjoying a senior, 9th grader, 6th grader, enjoying the benefits of the Portsmouth school system. And what I fear now is that my senior, who's about to launch, and everybody who's been through that process and all the stress that goes along with that and the joy that goes along with that, what I hear here about what we're going to cut and positions are going to be taken away, I hear that my 9th grader is not going to get what my 12th grader received. And that my 6th grader may end up getting less than that if the mindset is going to be what we're going to cut each year out of education, because the cost of living in Portsmouth and New Hampshire and the world has risen. So speaking for myself, my wife, my family, what we recommend, and we'll back with our votes whenever it matters, is to go back to the 4.99%. That's what makes sense to us. And I think I apologize for sitting on the sidelines in the initial part of this, because I look at this community and I say, this is what creates value here. If you are simply a bottom line person, you can say home values are maintained by strong schools. The school district that I taught in most of the time I was there, that was the bedrock of that place, was that the great schools maintain the value. We've got a lovely little city here, and we know that people love to come and visit here, but it is the people who live here, the people who learn here, and the people who work here that create the ongoing value. And so I would say to this group, as we go through some difficult machinations and some necessary steps, every large body should be evaluating its cost effectiveness, of course. But I don't agree with the idea that because the city council has initially said, let's see what 0 looks like, let's see what 2.9% looks like, that we automatically capitulate and assume that the voters are going to capitulate as well. I may be in the minority, I may be totally off base, but I don't think so. I know what my taxes go up. When I got mine, I know what it's gonna be more per month. I don't have extra. I've got college tuition to pay in the fall. But it's absolutely worth it to me. And it's gonna be worth it to me when my sixth grader launches as well, while we're here for the children after. And so I hope for all of you, whatever side you're on, is that you don't just say, well, what do we have to cut? I think we want to look at it and say, let's fight for more of what we need. So we maintain quality education, so we don't start on stair steps down in terms of what we're providing for our children. And instead we look at always cost effectively. Are we spending money wisely? Never stop doing that. But look at how we can continue to excel as a community in terms of what we're offering to our students. Thank you very much.
Can we shut that off?
That's the heat.
Yeah, but I can't, it affects my ability to hear too. I don't know if it's that cold in here right now.
Moving, turn it off and turn. It's a
We start freezing.
funky dial. We have to get up and adjust.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll now move on to the next item of
Is
the.
there anybody on Zoom?
What?
Let me look real quick. Just-
Zoom?
Yeah.
Are we doing Zoom?
Check out Zoom.
Thank you, Liz.
Do we announce
If
anybody?
if you're on Zoom and you'd like to speak, please use the hand raise. And I don't see anybody right now.
Someone comes up, let us know.
Yeah. Keep an eye out.
Okay.
Check it.
Okay, we will move on. I think what I'd like to do is ask Zach to run us through the most recent developments, and then we'll discuss each item after he completes his presentation.
So give me just a minute, 'cause I got two roles I'm playing at the same time, which is the master of ceremonies, and I'm also getting my stuff set up. So speaking just a moment. No Patty tonight, so.
Is it gonna be the memo that you pull out?
It's gonna be it's not gonna be the memo. I put together some very quick slides which really mirror the memo. So
Okay,
if someone's at home, it's easier
well,
than me
yeah,
scrolling.
I just was wondering. to
So-
return or-
Yeah.
So you can see the screen.
Yeah, is this in the packet?
It was not, I just put
Oh,
together,
okay.
so there's nothing in here that's not, this is just a reformulation of the memo. So this is, as I said, this is it's not very pretty, but it allows us to kind of roll through the slides as opposed to flipping through the memo that I provided. Before we get to the talking about buyouts, I just wanted to kind of refresh. So the conversation that we've been in was as we had finished our process of developing a budget. And we would typically start in January, and we would get January, we wrap up the February break. Going through our typical process, we had already finished our kind of staff development over multiple months of what our proposal was going to be to you folks. At that time, we were asked to stand down in our process until City Council had an opportunity to weigh in with some guidance. So we put our process on pause. We allowed City Council to have their meeting, and I think City Council talked about two different things. A 2.9% increase for the city as a whole, which included a 2.9% expectation from departments. And that part of that, when we talk about what a 4.99 is and the 2.9, that in that version of that guidance, that 2.9% included the school department taking on anticipated raises that might come as part of the 5 different union contracts that we're negotiating right now as we speak for FY 26. So when we initially had brought to you 4.99, I think to be fair to folks on the city side, they would look at the 4.99 and say, really, that wasn't a 5, that was like a 7 or 7.5 that you were bringing forward as part of your conversation. So I want to just be fair as we have the dialogue to say that was where we started with the city saying we need to get down to 2.99. We had talked about here, and then it got into the press, like what is that in terms of trying to gauge the depth of what we're talking about? How do you try to conceptualize that? And we talked about not that we were going to cut 15 teachers, but that the amount that the council was potentially asking us to reduce would be the equivalent of a mid-table teacher and 15 of those folks if we were just trying to hit initially the 2.9% without addressing the raises that would come potentially through union contracts. And that's where we began our decision. So we have our conversation. So we've met with a bunch of different people who have come in and done deep dives on things. We talked to Kenny Lynchy, who was part of facilities, looking at kind of his costs, what's going on within the CIP. We talked with Rick Matty, the Director of Student Services, about special ed costs and what was going on in relation to that. We talked about the process around which we make determinations around out-of-district placements. We talked through that. So we've been, the last time we had spoken, we had discussed the fact that because I've been talking about it for a while now, moving towards offering a buyout package to certain staff members in an effort to have folks who are really close to retirement maybe decide they're going to step into retirement and do so in a way that might potentially put us in a position to recognize some cost savings at the same time. So when we last spoke, we talked about the fact that I was not going to be coming back to the board to approve what that buyout would look like, but we were working with our union and with other folks about putting something together. So this was the package that we put together. We offered employees 10 slots. This was so maybe on the Thursday before vacation, we put this out to folks. The people who were eligible to take advantage of this were folks who are on our highest wage scale step. And they did not have to necessarily serve in the district for a certain period of time. It was just we were looking for the folks who were the highest earners. The exchange was that we would offer a $15,000 one-time payment at the end of the year, and then we would have a commitment from those folks to retire from the district. We did not. Some buyout packages sometimes will expect that you are going to then you're committing to then go into the New Hampshire retirement system. You're completely stepping out of education. These folks may or may not do that. We simply were asking that you were basically ending your relationship with portions of the department. We notified people a little less than 24 hours in advance of when this would happen, that at 5 o'clock on the Friday before vacation, that we would start to receive via email those notices from people that they were interested and that they were giving us an irrevocable commitment to retire from the district. We received at 5 o'clock, we received 11 of those requests and no more after that. So our decision was to try to see whether or not we feel like it was appropriate for us to add one. We did. So we took 11 of those folks. These are the positions because we can't control, we weren't controlling we weren't offering individual employees. We were offering within that group. These are the folks that were that accepted the buyout across the district. These are 11. These are the 11 folks that come from a variety of different locations across the district in a variety of different positions. One of the things we were looking at from the beginning is, and I think this was a conversation that we were having internally, we know that offering 10 buyouts does not mean that we would have 10 positions that we looked at that we felt that we were not going to fill. We knew we would have some roles that we couldn't avoid being in a position to push back out. We would not necessarily recognize cost savings from the reduction of position, but we might, depending on who we hire, we might be in a position where we would hire some folks that are paid at a cheaper rate than some of the folks that we have now. So of these roles, we'll come back to which ones, but there are 11 positions. I think it's 7 that are positions that we would not, under the proposal that we're going to offer tonight, we would not refill. And there's 4 that we would. As we've been going through this conversation, and I'll acknowledge, I want to make sure it's important to me. My dad is a special ed director and my wife's special ed coordinator. Because we're definitely not trying to scapegoat students with disabilities. All we're trying to acknowledge is within this cost center, we have a $1.2 million operational increase in our overall operational budget, and 1.3 of it almost is coming through special education, not exclusively connected to district placements, but a large portion of it is. And then in addition to that, the other big obstacle for us as a group to try to hit the 2.9% number from the city council is the contract contingency. So it's about $1.3 million is what's estimated. And we refer to this, and we refer to it during our processes of COLA. You'll hear that term thrown around a lot. It's just a cost of living adjustment. Lots of city contracts are connected to 10-year rolling COLAs. And so there's an anticipation that in whatever comes out of these union contracts, that most likely, most of these will have some tether to what is a 10-year rolling average connected cost of living within the region. And that's that figure as an estimate. City manager, as part of our process, is when we were talking about, city manager meets with all the departments, including the charter departments, to see where we are in our work. And we were very honest about the fact that if we were looking at a 2.9% with COLA, that we would, we'd be looking at the equivalent of 24.5 average teacher reduction. And as a money equivalent, again, we would not exclusively do teachers. And the city council at the same meeting indicated they had an interest in seeing what a zero looked like. And so that gets into the 40s. Both of those were going to be tremendously devastating to our ability to deliver services, same level which we're at now. And so we talked. We had good conversations, but strong conversations about the concern about the impact those other kind of possibilities would have on the district, and to that about the conversation that someone spoke to before about the extent to which we think that the public is okay with spending some of these funds on schools. Ultimately, recently, we came to an understanding in terms of, as the city manager formulates her proposal. Now, her proposal ultimately still has to go through the city council. City council has to make decisions about what it feels is appropriate. But that her proposal, if we could get down to 2.9% without the COLA, because of these 2 other costs that we're dealing with at the same time, that the city would, through other funds and through other portions of the budget, not hold us responsible for the COLA, which is unbelievably different than those 2 different scenarios. If we were trying to cover a COLA and 2.9 versus not, it changed the game for us. Also, the other commitment that we've got is very similar to what we've done in the past, that we would be in a position, if we came to this arrangement, we'd be in a position to go through our normal spring hiring process. One of the questions that we had was if, for example, the city council wanted to see a 0, would there be an expectation that when we hit April 1, which is when we give continuing contracts out to teachers, would we be in a position where we would have to hold back the number of contracts connected to what would a 0 look like until the city completed its process? So I think we've talked about this as a group. The city council will not have the city manager's budget in their hands until April 28th. They are not scheduled to complete their process until the first week in June. So if we were to respond to that 0 and to not be hiring, or respond to the COLA, or respond to any of these things, then we would put a large portion of our workforce in a position where they don't know if they have a job or not for the next year. And in this environment, as we're hitting the hiring season for schools, could then put us in a spot where we lose a lot of good employees while the city timeline for the consideration gets lined up. So under the discussion that we're having now, we would do the 2.9%. We would not be, as a result of kind of the special education increases, the city would cover the COLA amount, and we would be allowed to go into this hiring season like any other. That's very important because basically right now, March is we're in the front end of the hiring season. So if we're in a position to get into this and have this agreement, then operationally it puts us in a spot where we're able to go out, we're able to start, we're posting, we're hiring, including the positions that were inside of that buyout list where the roles that we would want to continue to fill. Here are the folks, here are the roles that right now we're proposing. Now, also important for people at home who are just kind of joining this process, you know that from what we originally presented, we've gone through multiple rounds of reductions of non-personnel based requests and expenditures. So we've come back to you a couple times where Brian has done a series of reductions, which have clawed back our requests in a variety of other areas in order to really make sure that before we get to any conversation about staff reductions, that we have done the other things we can possibly do. So I want to make sure that's in context. This was in our first step. We've done other things first before we've gotten to this. So this list of folks are the positions that we would not refill. Most of those positions, if you look
I'm
at
sorry, Pip, would you go to slide left there? Thanks.
most of those positions are positions that are covered by the buyout. So we would not fill some of these roles. The two that are the exception is the district wellness coordinator, who we heard from earlier. And then the other position that you see on there, it has 0 FTE connected to it. It's a classroom teacher, LOA. That's a teacher who, from the period of time we put the booklet together to the period of time we came to you, was kind of renewed leave to stay out for another year. That's the role that's connected to kindergarten teacher Ben Finney at New Franklin School, who had asked the board for a second year to stay out on leave. So that was actually caught, thanks to Byron. Byron caught that was in there as an additional listing that we were not going to need for the upcoming year, but it's the number of teachers that we have on the ground. But that's the other one. So all of those positions effectively don't end up affecting a person who is currently in a role who would not have a job later in this proposal outside of Ms. Burke, who you heard from earlier this evening. I will say this list was larger. In the newspaper, there was an article where Seacoast Online talked to a teacher who had been notified about the possibility that at this meeting that their job might be discussed in some form. That was real. There are other folks who were in the people that we talked to about the possibility that their position would be discussed as additional possible cuts as the board tried to weigh what to do in relation to the 2.9. So this list now was another 3 to 4 people deep beyond this, and it did include more people that were going to be impacted because they were not in positions that were buyouts. But as a result of people who took the buyouts, rather than laying off someone who was in a position where they were going to make $60,000 a year, we had people who were making $108,000 a year, and those folks were in a spot where they contributed to the savings that we're within our budget that we're building towards the 2.9%. That put us in a position where we could move up and have a couple of those folks who we talked to on the Friday before break about the possibility that this could be discussed, and now not have them on the proposal that we're offering you now. So anyway, so that's where those positions are. Just two other quick slides, and then I can answer questions folks have. So just, I think what's really important is that we have very strong schools. However, we also have things that we're trying to improve and get better at the same time. And our strategic plan is targeted to do all that work. But we know that fundamentally, our staff, which is amongst the some of the best trained we have people who come to Portsmouth who were department heads in their old communities, and then they come to us 4 or 5 years into their career. They come to us because we compensate them well. They know our schools are effective schools. They also think this is a stable place where they're giving up their seniority and their protection in another place to come to our community. And we have a reputation for being a place that's stable. So I want to acknowledge that anytime we're cutting any positions, the staff is the core of what we're doing in terms of the quality of service that we're delivering to the community. The city, we acknowledge the city council is trying to respond to the shifting tax burden from reevaluation. It is true that the reevaluation doesn't raise the amount of taxes across the city, but it has shifted the burden. And so folks, particularly folks who have been in the community for a long time, they have been particularly hit hard by the reevaluation of their properties. And this little, so just want to I think it's fair for the city council to be trying to think about that. Hitting the 2.9% in the COLA, or hitting with the COLA, or hitting 0% would have significant damage to programming. And I think I appreciate the city manager's office has appreciated that's something that really weigh as we're thinking about what we're doing. And then our the decision to then in turn not hold accountable for COLA, I think was an indication of the value that the city places on education. The other departments are expected to cover their own COLA this time around, and we're in a position where we're not. That's a unique decision by the city manager's office, and I think it's one that we should not take lightly. The last one is I think it speaks to a couple of different voices that we had at the table from citizens this evening, and I think we have an ongoing conversation that's going to have to happen in the community. If we're going to stay at around a 2.9, let's call it a 3% cap for future years, I think that even the council, through Councilor Tabor, has indicated that they understand that the run rate for basically level service in the schools, including what's happening in connection with collective bargaining agreements, is about 4.5%. So if we're adjusting course in a way where the kind of intermediate term for the next several cycles, the council would want to move in a 3% or less situation, we will basically be dealing with the fact that we will slowly be cutting away at portions of what we do. Now, we can always seek efficiencies. There are things that we can do better. There's ways in which we can be more efficient. But at those types of rates, I think the community will have to have a conversation about can it afford the schools that it has or not, and what is it willing to how is it willing to approach that problem? So I think whatever we ends up happening this year, I think it is important that we know that in future years we are moving into this conversation that we need to have with the city council, we need to have with the manager, and we need to have with the community as a whole about how people want to spend their funds, and when is what we're asking for too much. So those are those quick slides. I apologize, there's a lot of context building in there as well. I'm happy to take.
Before we open it up to questions,
Yeah.
could you briefly describe how you think we can survive without these 7 positions?
Sure. I mean, I think that if you give me just a minute. So if we look at each of those different roles, I think I think we are, I think what's fair to say is we are. Anytime we lose a person who's inside of our schools, and is doing work connected with children or supporting the people who is doing the work connected with children, it has a negative impact when those people are no longer there. That's, so there's no zero negative impact scenario in order to hit the type of numbers we're looking at. But we do feel that that the things that we're proposing to you in terms of trying to hit that number are things that we can absorb, and while there will be some negative impact, that the scale of that impact, if we're trying to hit that number for the purposes of the operational kind of benefits that we think are going to come, and the and trying to do our part as a city kind of moves forward with this budgeting work, we think it's a good balance. So with the elementary positions, so this actually ends up being a reduction in 2 elementary positions across the district. And I leaned on Byron and I were having this conversation. I know we've had all these dialogues over the course of redistricting about what the impact would be on class sizes. And this actually works out. We move from, I think it was 50, if I have my count right, 50, and you guys can correct me, 58 to 56. And if we are roughly the same number of students on average, of course, our kids, we don't have all our kids broken up into exact sections. We don't have, those sections are not the same by grade level at every single school, but on an average, that moves us from about 15 and a half students per classroom teacher at the elementary to 16.07. So I think, and I don't think I'm the only one, I've talked to other folks, we think that's a margin that we can absorb, right? We are still well within the guidelines of our CBA in the state. We're not in a situation where we're talking about average class sizes in the 20s. We still would have reasonably small class sizes, put us in a position to continue to do a nice job with the elementary schools. So that's those couple. The middle school tech ed position would one of the things that the guys at the middle school have been working through is they do have a really robust set of elective offerings. Within this realm of tech ed, they have this tech ed position, they have a second tech ed position, and they have a third kind of adjacent position, which is a STEAM teacher. And they think that they're able to absorb with those other 2 roles, they'll be able to absorb the students that are who would be affected by the reduction of that one particular tech ed position. There's a combination position that's a teacher that has taught a variety of different things, and right now has a combination of yoga, some computer-based like digital design stuff, and then has taught a class that is a yearbook class that also helps produce the yearbook. So also these are things we think we're able to absorb. There are other folks who have the computer technology stuff can be picked up. Yearbooking function as a club, or could be reassigned to an English teacher as a class. But the yoga elective is currently it wasn't offered in 25, 26. I'm sorry, would not be offered in 25, 26. And that would probably be something that would be discontinued or rolled into part of some of our physical education type work. French at the high school, we had 2 roles. I'll just tell you this is a combination. The numbers at the moment in terms of our number of students who are taking French at the high school would not necessarily justify a full second French position at the moment. So there is another French teacher. So we also have, in this case, we've got the French teacher going, and we've got the teacher who currently teaches Italian and Latin also accepting a buyout. So in both of these roles, I know the high schools, their approach is, and they want, and this is part of why it's important to get early into the hiring season, would be they're trying to hire people with multiple lingual certificates. Those folks are out there. We are a destination for folks, and so the goal would be to pick up some additional. Hope would be pick up some additional French opportunities, but also have some folks someone that would be able to cover those. Cover the Italian as well. But that would not be two reductions where we would rehire that Italian Latin, the FTE, that is Italian Latin, and hope to pick up some additional capacity towards French. But we don't think that the number of students enrolled at this time justifies another full-time position. Let's see what else is in there.
School council.
Can we just ask, are people cold? I'm getting cold.
No.
People.
High school
Are
council.
you cold? All right, can we put the heat on for a few minutes? Thank you. Bye.
So the high school counselor, right now, currently at PHS, there are 9 counselors. So that you have a counselor at each grade level. You have a career counselor. You have a college counselor. You have a what do we have? College counselor. You have a substance abuse counselor. And then you have 2 counselors that are connected with special education. So we want to continue to make sure we're using our counseling departments to service students' needs. But and again, we're responding to something that we got just before vacation, but the high school principal feels like we can look at reorganizing the folks that we have to provide reasonably similar service by reorganizing the 8 remaining folks that we would.
So I just
Yeah.
have a question on that. So, what counselor position is accepted the buyout?
This is one of the class, the connected with. Classic. Classic.
Thank you.
Yeah, Classic.
Okay.
So,
And that can be absorbed in another.
well, I think what we're gonna work on is reorganizing the folks that we have. So it could be that someone else from one of those other roles plugs into a class counselor role. It could be that just restructuring in general, how that is gonna work. We just think that there's the ability to rework that group of 8 people to carry most of them.
Should we let him finish or I have a
follow-up to that.
Yeah.
if you Don't mind. Because I was looking at this, I see 5.3 FTEs under guidance counselor. Where are the others?
So career counselor, you find under CTE
Okay.
stuff, there are 2 counselors that fall under student academic services, which is special education at the high school. I'm trying to think of the name.
Substance abuse comes out too.
And substance abuse is paid for through a school assistance program grant. So it's a 60%, currently 60% of that person's cost is paid through that substance abuse grant. And our hope is in the upcoming year that would be as much as 80. But at the moment, it was based on, we had applied, if you remember, that position was formerly held by Eileen Marusick. She made less than the person as Eileen moved on. We hired another, again, this speaks to us as a destination for folks. We hired a veteran, strong counselor, Gilbert, take over that role. But the money that we had already received permission for from the grant covered 60% of her salary because she made more than I did. So this year we're now applying for 80 for the amount for that.
There's also a registrar and administrative assistant.
Scheme too, but those are not part of my 8 to 9 people.
Yes, yeah, that's where those points.
But those other support people are. Yep.
Okay, do you want to wellness coordinator?
Yeah, wellness coordinator is tough, and I think there's 2 reasons why it's hard. it's hard because, first it's hard because, Chris Burke is a good person. And so, she's a good person who cares about the district and, wants us to succeed and wants kids to succeed and cares about the mission of wellness. So that's difficult. It's also difficult because I think that as a board and as a community, I think we've heard folks speak to this on all kinds of different nights when we went through our strategic planning process, that we value and we want to service the child, not just the academic needs of kids. And we're very cognizant of all the things that students walk into our schools with. And we want to be a place that, and if you look at our portrait of graduate, it speaks to this in multiple ways. We want to be a place that builds the whole kid. And not just their academic skills, knowledge and skills. So when this position came about, it's been around before me. I think it was, I appreciate that the board at the time, the leadership at the time wanted to, Chris spoke to it in her stuff. She said, he goes places and people hear, oh, you have a wellness coordinator in your district, that is a feather in the cap. And people are like, wow, that's great. You clearly care about kids in all different ways that we should, and we should all aspire to have those types of things. I think the challenge is that the position itself, the way in which it is designed, doesn't advance that goal as much as it should. And it's not due to Chris. It's a position that it doesn't provide direct service. It's not a role where we have someone who's like a head of nurses, but they're also a nurse. It's not a position that's a certified counselor who's going to oversee counselors. And it's not an administrative position. So it doesn't have authority. And so the reality is that the role has, it floats in the organization in a way that I think is not, really hard to say this, but is not reflective of the money that we put into that role. And there's other ways in which we could structure what we do to better fulfill our own goals around social emotional learning and around the development of the child. Super hard to say that in terms of kind of what we heard, the emotion that's connected behind it. Again, it's not a shot at Chris. It's not a shot and her feeling for the district, but it's the design of the position was not designed to accomplish what it needs to. It's hard for me to say that, but I believe that to be true. And I think working with kind of our leadership team, I think that's reflective of the opinion.
Okay, so if I can just clarify, right now with what we just saw, we're at 2.9. Correct.
If 2.8 change, we're like the Walmart special 285 ish. Yeah, with some stuff that we're
Okay, and
plain.
Brian,
without the COLA. So no COLA, 2.85.
as we discussed, can you tell us what the percentage would be if we were to keep X?
I might be able to do that better. All right. I don't think
Okay.
I got the spreadsheet.
All right.
But if you
So,
can,
yeah.
you can.
We all have an
Well,
idea.
we mean as far as the COLA or?
No, just the whole number, the 2.9. If we were to keep, I'm just making this up to be ridiculous, the science teacher that we said we're gonna cut, which we didn't have that. But I'm just making an example.
That day, you're probably at about 5. You're not. Onward positions.
She was saying.
And
Each
one
individual,
position?
we have the ability to, so I've got a ballpark on each individual position in terms of thinking about it in relation to how does it relate to a 2.9% increase? I can answer those questions. as we go.
Okay. The only other thing I wanted to say before we start is this is a work session, so we don't vote. But what we can do is kind of get a consensus. And then in our meeting a week from now, we will actually vote. So keep that in mind. We don't take votes in the session. Brian.
Sorry, just to clarify what Zach was asking, sharing first before we go around with questions. the three, the elementary teachers.
Yep.
Can you talk a little more about this one that wasn't thought out, that's on the leave of absence? Like, what does that mean? Like, I don't want
Yeah.
to are we gonna get into any issues with the fact that, we're cutting somebody that's on a leave of absence and what that?
Well, what we would do,
repercussions?
we would take those savings. But we would be in a position when, if at the end of the next year, so teachers under our CBA, they can ask for an initial unpaid leave of absence for a year, then they can come back and ask for a second year. And that's the cap, can't go any further than that. So Ben is going out this teacher is going out on his second year. This would be the conclusion of what we would allow him under the contract. So he would then have to make a decision about returning or not returning. If he was to return at the moment, he would come back into an environment. If nothing changed a year from now, nobody left us, everybody stayed the same. He'd come back into an environment where he would have potential bumping rights for a position that he would come back into coming back. So. So he would be able to bump someone, a lower level teacher, so a teacher with less seniority, not just seniority, but
So
we
you're
have.
identifying him now as the person that we're getting rid of?
Nope, so he's not gonna be here. So his FTE, which was living in the
Yeah.
budget, he's gonna be gone for the year. So for the upcoming year, we're not going to, we're not filling that role. We're not budgeting for that role. When he returns potentially in the fall of, or it's 27, he would potentially have the right, if everybody stayed in their position and nobody went anywhere.
Yeah.
He would have the right to bump someone, someone who's lower on the RIF score chart than him, out of a role, so that he could come back in. And then
We
that
don't-
person be reduced in force or laid off.
We don't have an obligation to hold a position when somebody's on a leave of absence.
So we are holding, so for him, he has a right to return. That's what we're doing.
Okay,
So we're holding the position, but we don't hold it in a budget slot with the money on it. We're waiting for him to come back and then we have to kind of figure it out.
Okay, I saw Brian, Kerry, Tish. And Nathan.
So I was just hoping to get some clarity on what the true run rate is, because I know that we're talking about this.
Yep.
And I've heard a couple numbers. The reason I'm saying this is because this is gonna, we do agree to a lower number. Want to set expectations for next year, because we're not gonna be in a position where we can ask. I mean, this well's gonna be a little bit dry next year, and do we really want to get rid of these positions or that number of positions next year? So the question is, I know that you put 4.5 on the slide, and I heard 5.4 if we kept the people.
Right.
So what is the number, and then what is that number with COLA, maybe, so I'm just trying to
So
understand.
for the last couple of years, I think what we talked about is, and it's, Brian, you jump in.
No.
So I was just gonna say, I would say that the conversation we've had in the past is that based on the CBAs that have been previously agreed to by the board, by the council, that when you build in just those raises, if you were to maintain your staffing levels and build in just those raises, and I think, I'm trying to remember if this is accurate or not, and put in a hair of inflationary increase across your non-personnel stuff, that you start your conversation each year at, we're at 4.5. Like, that's a starting point. And then as you want to add on other things, then it could become more than that. So I don't know, Brian, if you want to.
Now, the number I was quoting was basically leaving where we started, very beginning. Still not even including the COLA. So we've cut that much down through operational budget. But I mean, 4.5 is probably on the lower side. I mean, depending on.
That's what
Again,
That's what I'm,
yeah, I think we've heard the deputy city manager for finance talk about this back when he was doing this other role. He was like, yeah, just you're on the starting line to start the cycle each year. You're at 4.5. and That's
Get a
it.
clarify on that 4.5, is that is included in that 4.5, like what we've seen in terms of special education in that district we're seeing this year?
Yeah.
No, so
Nope.
really the difference rate is 4.5 plus.
plus, that's
Yeah.
what I'm getting at.
Yes, right. If we were to see the same trends in special education increases, right? And so then we're not in a position in a cycle like this to say, well, we're just not going to give these services that we're required to, at this point where we are, required by law to grant. But there's always things we can do in terms of thinking about how we structure the delivery of special education. I think we talked about this when Dr. Matty was here. You know, it's the idea of, can we identify clusters of students with similar disabilities that would allow us to build in-house programs that we could then staff because there's an economy of scale, because we've got enough kids to make it something we could do. I do think there are situations where, depending on the complexity of need, it would never be cost effective for us to build a program in-house because we just don't have the expertise. That'd be too specialized and too expensive for us to be able to run it ourselves. So there will, you know, I've never been in a district that doesn't have some students out in special education placements because they're just a variety of needs. But those are things we're always looking at in the long run. But in the short run, yes, if the 1.3, we're in the same type of cycle, then we're at a bigger than 4.5% increase. And I think the thing anecdotally you'll hear, and this data nationally to support it, is that in this, people will scoff at, well, we shouldn't be talking about COVID anymore. But there's a lasting tail on for COVID, in terms of COVID, and in terms of the impact, particularly around disabilities, less around disabilities like dyslexia, but what we're seeing is an increase in social emotional behavioral disabilities, and simultaneously a collapse of the rest of the social service net in a lot of states where there are less psychological services available for kids outside of the school system. So what ends up happening is schools then end up absorbing that cost because states are they're confident they can push it off on the schools.
Okay.
Clarify my question quickly.
Yes.
So it's our real continuing operations percentage. It's more like 5.5 to 6, or what are we saying if we're trying to ballpark that? It definitely doesn't sound like 4.5.
I mean, I think.
But that's kind of, I think, what
I hear what you're saying, and
that really is important.
yeah. I don't know, Ryan, what do you think?
It'd be a ballpark figure, but I mean. 5 probably. I mean, that's level service with standard colas. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things that skews us is we have a lot of senior teachers, which are at the top of the pay scale. So a 2 or 3% raise for them, much higher than a 3% raise for somebody who's lower in written. So that kind of skews the numbers more than other districts probably. So that's why I have the gate to the high.
Yeah.
Of course, the special ed costs are something that we can somewhat control, but not fully control like we can other expenses for education. So that's kind of where the challenge lies. We have to really ride that balance because we have to be compliant, but we also have to utilize funds, limited funds.
Carrie, thank you, Brian. Carrie.
I'm very challenged by the not including COLA in our budget. So just based on the amount in the contingency for contractual outcomes, that would be about 2% of our budget. So I have a hard time if our proposed was 4.99 and then 2% would be in addition to that contingency fund. I know that we have some retirements and things like that, but it's sounding more like 7%. And so I guess I'm very worried about celebrating a 2.9% increase. And then next year asking for 7%, which is really a continuing services. In my opinion, and I appreciate that the city is trying to work to figure out how to fund this, but I would be very uncomfortable passing a budget that did not have that COLA estimation within it, because I find that is the price of doing business. And I think that's gonna just shoot us, that's like kicking the can another year. If the city decides to fund it out of different resources, then that's the city's decision, but I can't imagine the tax rates, everything should not be calculated on that number, so. I appreciate the creative solution, but I think as a board, we have to look at like actual operating costs and what that is, so. I just kind of wanted us to consider that, and I do think we need a little more on the 4.99 that we had originally, and then this 2% for COLA. Because it just feels like the numbers all have an asterisk, and we need all the numbers and like posted and listed, in order to really make a decision and for public accountability too.
Thank you, Terry.
Just a clarifying point, people have been on the board longer. We haven't traditionally added the COLA in.
Oh,
This would be the first year that they would normally say,
Separate accounts.
don't worry about the COLA, worry about this budget versus the next. This is the first year they've actually said that or mentioned that piece, and I just want for the guys.
Say that again.
The
Yeah.
COLA.
Unpack that.
Yeah, so normally what we would not include the COLA in, yeah, and we haven't done that for, I've been in 8 years now.
Yeah.
And I don't remember them ever.
So they're giving us the gift we already have.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm just, I didn't.
So, my point is now they are changing the narrative a little bit. And if that is true, then next year might look like a higher increase, but I'm just, just pointing that out.
Very helpful.
Yeah. I'm seeing the same thing.
Tish, you were next, and then Nathan, and then Liz.
Okay, I have two things, but I'm not gonna, it will be quick.
Yeah.
One is following up on, when Counselor Cook was here, talking about the class sizes at PHS
Yep.
and the limiting. Were you able to look into that?
Yeah, I apologize. That was it. When we originally left, that we actually talked about Steve coming. And I was gonna have Steve do a write-up, and then I got bogged down in some stuff.
No,
But
understood.
I'll have it, I can, I can come back with a fuller thing on the 11th.
Okay, I want to follow up. on
And
that.
I appreciate it.
My other, is really a concern, about the rest of the professional teachers in our district and, of course, being a community member, we hear they're unsettled with
Yeah.
this whole process. And my fear is that through this process, we are going to lose some good teachers. And I'm just banging my head as to how that we can make that not happen.
Right.
There's gotta be, we've all been on a chopping block before, maybe. And you're left feeling very uncertain. For your job and your future, so that you do have to gotta cover yourself, start
Yeah.
looking. So how are we going to make the professionals in
Yeah.
our community feel more confident that
Yeah, so twofold. I think one, there's a long-term, there's a short-term thing. So the long-term is, and I had this conversation with you guys. I've definitely communicated it through city leadership, but through the mayor. And I think there's a little bit of an aura of what we are that's been damaged already. And just because people had to, now it is a contractual thing that you haven't been doing, but they had to fill out this, what have you done for me lately survey, basically, and how long you've been here. And that's like unnerving, and people haven't had to do that. They had to know that potentially cuts were coming. I thought it was appropriate and to be transparent as much as anything with the city council. If you want us to do this, this is what it's gonna be. So then that's damaging and you're like, oh, well, there's real conversation about this. They had most recently hear from maybe a colleague who was talked to, where it was like, we need you to know, because I think this is really important. It was like, do you do that stuff for effect? And no, we don't do it for effect. But I'm a firm believer that if someone who works for us, if there's a possibility that we're going to be talking about their position, even if it's not them by name, I don't want them walking into work and having a colleague be like, did you see the board meeting the other night? I think they're talking about your job. Just, I never want that to happen. And I always want to be able to be in a position where you're preemptively telling people, look, there's a possibility. Let me give you the context of why this is going to be discussed. Here's what I think the probability or lack of probability there is this could occur, but I want you to hear from me. This is what I think. So some cases, those are conversations that happen directly with me. Most of the time it's with their building principal. That's damaging. So, you know, I worry about all that, and I very much worry about what you guys are getting at in terms of what is our run rate. That if we're in this cycle where we're whittling each year, that will have long-term detrimental impacts on who's willing to come to us. And how do people just feel about Portsmouth, how they are valued in terms of their profession. Now, short run, moving in this direction potentially and accepting this opportunity to move forward in this way puts us in a spot where kind of I've been told that we're in a position where we will be backed for going through our normal hiring process. So what I don't need to do if we were to go in this direction is I don't need to, on April 1st, hold back 25, 30 contracts in my back pocket to wait to see what city council does. I've been told, go ahead. Now that's normal in a normal hiring cycle. That's what we do. We come to a proposal. We make decisions about what we think we're going to do. We go to the city manager. The city manager tells us, this is what I'm going to include or not include in my proposal. And then we start hiring based on that proposal. So we would do the same thing here because we would be included in the city manager's proposal. So that would put a whole bunch of people who work for us on, if they know in the middle of March or with the first week in March, they know that on April 1, they're going to get their continuing contract. It's not in doubt. There's nobody, we're not talking about it. We're not worried about it. Like it's just going to happen. So I think that's really important for our staff to know as well. And so one of the advantages of taking this opportunity now is it puts us in a position where we don't have a ton of staff who have to worry about next year. We can put that to bed now. And that's one of the reasons why I think it might be the right move at the moment, while definitely planting the flag that we're talking about, which is this is not repeatable. We're going, as Brian said, like the well will be dry. We will have done our bleeding. And we think we've done it in a way that we're able to mitigate and most of it. But we're not in a position to come back to well and eliminate 8 positions next year, or the equivalent, even if it's not eight positions, the financial equivalent of 8 positions next year. So I think all those things are swirling in the soup at the same time. But it's what's really great about here is there are a lot of communities where teachers have to worry year to year for a long time until they become senior. Do I have a job next year? And we have benefited repeatedly during our hiring processes with people who are like, I'm leaving that place a little north of here, a little west of here, to come to you because I think it's a place where I don't have to worry about that as a professional. And so hopefully we're able to retain that because I think it improves the quality of the folks who come to work for us. So.
One just quick follow-up to
Yeah.
that. So the teachers will get their contracts on April 1st. When do they have to have the signed contracts passed?
Oh man, that's a great CBA quiz. I will let you know, and I'll let you walk at it.
Okay.
I should know that right off the top of my head. And I can't remember, it's the 15th or something.
Nathan, thank you, Tish. Nathan.
Yes, first I'd like to start with just saying, I think that Tish, what you just said was one of the biggest things in this whole process. This is the first budget meeting that I've been able to attend, but the conversation that we haven't had is what the effect was on all the teachers. I can't speak for what your experience was, Mr. Moore, but I lost count after 20 teachers came up to me during the school day the past few weeks asking what I knew about the budget. If their job was going to be no longer next year. And to me, that was what was not only stressful, but also really thought-provoking to what they were going through. And for them to find out then before break that, oh, there's buyouts, so maybe I'm in the clear. I think what you said, sir, also about your freshman not having the same experience as your senior who will be graduating, I think that's very real. Even, I'm gonna go through the three at the high school because I'll leave out the other ones for now. But computer, you need a computer credit to graduate high school. After this one leaves, you're gonna have one computer teacher teaching all graphic design, web page design, Python and coding, as well as all of the intro courses, which you need to graduate in high school. So there's gonna be one. Secondly, French. I got some numbers back, but roughly 58% of the population at Portsmouth High School is in language. With that, it's about, the ballpark, 150 to 200 students are in the French program. Having this teacher leave, you have one French teacher, one French teacher. I was also during some point this week was going to email Paulette to put another presentation on for the April first, second week in April meeting to really articulate to you all the importance of language, but also how to value what we have here. So it was really, really sad for me to see that this French position was going to be no longer. Similar to computer in a way, all those students who want to start taking French, you're going to have a limited availability to allow students in the lower grades to take French and get started because the priority is going to go to the upperclassmen. So you may also lose interest in the foreign language program and in French because you quite literally cannot take the class. There's too many kids. Also, the school counselor, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I heard and counted with my fingers today, and also on the website, there would be 7 counselors left. All of them have their own specific duties within that department to do what they need to do. And the one leaving is a class counselor. You have your class counselor for 4 years. Mine, Miss Donovan, I'm gonna have her next year. And I quite literally don't know how we're supposed to figure out who is going to be the sophomore class counselor next year. I don't understand how that's possible. And for the comment to be, oh, well, like maybe we can tack it on to someone else. All of the other people are in their offices doing work all day. So quite literally, it's not possible to give that job to someone else because 3 others are already taking their whole day to do it. So I think we really need to look deeper into this aspect of what we are trying to propose, as well as the rates in the years going on, but this is a discussion we need to have.
Thank you, Nathan. Liz, you're next.
Couple comments and some questions. I obviously had to leave the last meeting early, but it wasn't on the agenda to be talking about buyouts. The agenda talked about special education. I left, we were talking about special education. Asked my questions and then I had to leave. My concern is that I don't even think we had public comment on the agenda, but Counselor Kate Cook came in, she mentioned buyouts, and I think that, you know, buyouts have been a conversation that we've talked about, obviously. But I felt like, honestly, I like Kate Cook, but I do feel like it was an overstep for her to be sitting here, making the comments, talking beyond 3 minutes, and then have everything that she's saying be considered. I also feel like the council is overreaching at this point. We make the budget, we're elected to make the school budget. They can give us some guidance about percentages or whatever, but for them to have their hands so fully in and so fully engaged on what we're doing, where we're cutting, where we're going and whatnot, it's their job to reject whatever we put in front of them if they don't like it. And maybe ask some questions then. But I feel like we're getting into this overreach at this point, especially with the meeting last night, when then we're talking about, oh, we're going to vote to have a meeting with the council so that they can, why are we even here? Like, if it's our job as a school board to make the school budget and to listen to admin and try to understand and present it to council. So I feel like the council is really coming on a line here in overreaching. I appreciate the sentiment, but I think it's complicating our budget process. I think it's complicating your job. as a superintendent to try to be so responsive to them when the people you need to be responsive to are in this room. And so I think there's some overreach going on. And so I'm a little bit concerned with this buyout, because I think, Nathan made some great points there, boots on the ground about what this is gonna mean. I'm sad to see one of the teachers from the middle school taking the buyout who does a lot of the after-school programs for the kids. He's one of those teachers, he's quality teacher, we might get a new candidate that is quality, that might also be up the pay scale too, because of their certifications and whatnot too. So we're not guaranteeing that we're gonna have this huge cut just because we're getting rid of this one person. And so I think, my concern is that although I wasn't there for the conversation, I think it wasn't on the agenda. I do wish that we had more of a further conversation about the implications about what this might look like. And I also, to Nathan's point too, to say, right before you're about to go on vacation, when these teachers are probably burnt out like the rest of us, after January, new presidency and a cold winter, ready to go on vacation, to say Thursday, hey, you got a night to sleep on it. Do you want to buy out? Let me know by 5 o'clock. I think that's a lot. We're already horrible with communication. That's been the issue all along, right? So to kind of do this, I think it creates a turmoil and whatnot. I think, there is strategy behind it, I guess. We see what the federal government's doing. They're creating a whole lot of turmoil to see what pops up or bubbles up or whatever. But I would have liked to have more of a understanding of what the implications would be, of what this might look like and what the plan is, and have a conversation before we went into this. So, I mean, it all sounded good. It sounded like you had really considered, these positions, but then hearing from Nathan and also seeing some of the positions too, I'm wondering what we're doing here. And I think, to Nancy's point, if we were to add a position back in, or add 2 positions back in, or 3 positions back in, and that bumps us up to 3.5, maybe that's what we want to do. Or maybe we want to go with what we initially said of 4.9. And if we're not talking about COLA, because we never talked about COLA, then maybe that's what we need to do. And if they want to come kick it back to us and reject it, then that's their prerogative. But I think the community, we need to understand, what we need. I also am curious too, like, does any of this go towards our strategic plan? Like, are there positions that we need to be adding to actually meet the goals of the strategic plan? It just seems like this is all reactionary to what the council's demands have been versus trying to understand what is, like, take the budget book that we got, which I'm not sure, if you could speak to the fact of, like, is it usually online? Why is it not online?
Yeah, it hasn't been since I've been here. So-
Okay.
But we'll.
Is there a
we'll-
copy in the library? I think there's
we'll
generally a
make sure
copy in the
it's
library.
available.
Okay, but, why aren't we sort of going down with what the budget that we're working with here and, I get the tough position that we're in. I worry, like I think others have expressed, that we're gonna set a tone now, and then, next year, we're gonna have to double it, and it's gonna be, I think we might be in a worse position, given how the federal government's going and the state government's going with school vouchers and everything else, so. Maybe more of a comment than a question there. I also am wondering, with the teacher negotiations, can we factor some of these issues into the pay scales that we're negotiating? And create lower pay scales just for starting employees, and make some shifts within the teacher negotiations to address where we might be next year or the year after too, and what that might look like. I guess I also just wonder, how are we gonna cut elementary school positions? I know you mentioned this, and there's shifts, but I think to take away 3 elementary school teachers, I feel like when we were doing school tours, where was he? So that position wasn't filled or needed last year?
So
Okay.
it appeared and it didn't need to appear. So basically so it's not one that would remove a body from the set of people in classrooms in the elementary schools. So it's 2.
Okay, and so where do those two magically coming from?
So so that's all gonna depend on what happens in terms of, okay, all right, let me go,
But how about, here's the
which ones do
question.
you want me to hit?
I guess here's the question.
Okay,
What if we get to enrollment?
Yep.
Kindergarten enrollment's up.
Yep.
We gotta use the room in New Franklin as a kindergarten room. We gotta do XYZ. We need another teacher. What do? We don't have it. If it's not in the
Like we
budget.
would do it in another year, we have to kind of make choices about where we put people, I mean, that's.
We'd have to cut
true.
another position to shift it. 'Cause I
No.
mean, we're not just not.
We
have a
just move
teacher.
people, we move people around. I mean, we're not gonna be in I don't anticipate a position, but we would redistribute students if we had clusters of students that were too many. Let's say we had, I don't know, 28 kids in the class in the third grade at Little Harbor. We'd add a third grade teacher and we'd pull that from somewhere else in the district, or we would pull it someplace within Little Harbor. I mean, those are things we do on an annual basis.
Yeah, I guess
So-
my understanding though of this whole redistricting thing though.
Yeah.
Was that because we're offering choice, there really probably wasn't gonna be a whole lot of movement going on. Like there was gonna be some shifts, but people are getting options and we don't really know. I don't know if we know yet of what their options are, what they're taking. But to me, based on whatever we voted on, didn't seem like we were gonna get a huge shift.
So we've got, and I haven't looked at the numbers recently, we've heard from about half the families that are that have an opportunity to shift. We've got some shifting that's happening, but not tons, is my understanding. Like today I was talking with the Little Harbor principal and I just know she was able to tell me like she picked up 3, based on what she's looking at in survey results so far, 3 first graders from someplace, right? So, but we have not done a deeper analysis because we're not done with that coming in.
Yeah,
I also don't know, those, we think and again, we're dealing with this over the last week, but we think we have the ability to redistribute the number of kids to go from, again, we're talking about 15 and a half kids per teacher to 16.07 kids, or what's called 16 and change per teacher. And we think we can absorb that and redistribute it across the system in some way.
how?
Yeah, we-
Like where?
It's
I
gonna
guess,
totally depend on where those kids are. We get kindergarten enrollments. We have to wait for the redistricting shifting is a small piece. What's really gonna be different is what happens when we do kindergarten enrollments, which start the end of this month.
yeah, but I guess my concern is that you're saying we already got rid of one, but we're gonna get rid of 2 more elementary school teachers. And, based on the school tours and the numbers that we've seen, I can't visualize. So I guess I'm wondering, how are you visualizing? Where are these teachers coming from? So
From
maybe
within-
those are the 2 positions
from
that
within
we
the
add
closed
back
system.
in because we don't know.
So within the group of existing, the 56 classroom teachers that we have, a K-5 across the district, we would redistribute those depending on what happens with kindergarten enrollments and the shifting of redistricting. And I think we would be in a position where we might have, just like we've had in recent years, we might have some grade levels in some buildings that end up with 20 kids in a 4th grade class, 21. We've had, that's, in our 5th grade class. And then, but that would totally be based on those enrollment patterns. But we're not going to be in a position where any of those buildings are going to be like, we've got 28 kids in a class in New Franklin School. That's not kind of, even with a large kindergarten enrollment, we wouldn't see that big a jump.
I guess I just don't if you were looking at like this year, right?
Yep.
Could you get rid of 2 elementary school teachers this year? And still have the numbers
It
that you
totally
need?
depends on, I mean, we can, so it
That's
depends
why-
on,
that's
it
why I'm
depends on
curious,
what,
like, I
it
think
depends
this
on,
in the
so it
sky.
depends on what level, it depends on how many kids you want in a classroom. So if we could get rid of, if we were accepted as a community, if we wanted to have an average class size in the 20s, we would be able to reduce a lot more teachers.
But I don't know that we can because I feel like, okay, for example, let's say we have, 3rd grade class, there's 15 kids per class, right? If you only had 2 classes or maybe you had 3 classes, I think 2 classes is a better scenario, right? You can't shrink that down to 1. If you had 3 classes, I guess the 2 absorb an extra, 7, 8 kids in each class if they're already at 15? no,
So
you know, and so I
these are
guess,
the types of decisions that like principals do this annually, but they sit down and they look at and they map out. And sometimes they end up with that, sometimes they end up with, you know, 3 classrooms of 17, and then there's another grade level with 2 classrooms of 20. And they make those types of choices in terms of how they're gonna redistribute staff, and those elementary principals do that every year.
I just don't see how.
We need to
We're
move
gonna,
on.
we're gonna,
We need to move on. But we have Byron and Lisa and then somebody else.
Just do a follow-up to that. Real quick.
Can we give them a turn? They haven't had a turn yet.
It's fine.
Okay.
Okay, I'm good.
Byron.
Okay. I'm gonna come back to COLA again. Because I feel like it's been said multiple ways, but I just want to get it clear. In the past, from what Brian said, COLA has not been something that's part of the budget.
So COLA has, and I've only been around for a couple
Yeah.
cycles. So the COLA is a contingency line.
Yeah.
Which is built in the budget
Okay.
around union negotiations across the
Okay.
city.
But it hasn't been like, when we go to like, when we talk when they talk numbers and we talk numbers and percentages, it hasn't been part of we're at 4%. And in that 4%, so go back 2 years, we're at 4%. In that 4%, COLA is not there.
I can't speak to the long-term history of it. I've only been around this is my 3rd cycle.
Okay.
I can't speak definitively. I'll trust what Brian's saying, but I can't speak
Yeah,
definitively.
I've gone back a few budgets in here, and there was one year where there was a line added to the budget where the COLA money came in because of contracts.
It's the year the contracts are up, is that
Yeah,
what you're saying?
it's when the negotiations go on. That's when it's in our budget. Now, next year, we don't have the union
Okay.
negotiations.
How-
So we already know what the COLA is gonna be for next year. Well, you do because it's built into the.
Well,
contract.
next budget cycle,
Okay.
we'll know for those 5 unions,
Right.
what the
Right.
salary impact is
Right.
across all.
But
those.
this year you don't because they're negotiating it.
Right, but I guess the more fundamental question though is whether or not we know it or not. Specifically, like next year, sure, we'll know what the number is, but will that number be part of the budget?
Yes, that's my understanding.
We
It will be.
Yeah,
part of the
I
budget.
mean,
It's
we,
because we're
yeah, at
in
that point,
negotiation now that it's not.
Okay, so it's because of
That's
negotiations.
my understanding.
And so in the going back in the past, it's been on so every time there's a teacher negotiation, there is a step change in terms of the run rate.
Yeah.
Yes,
yes, we'll just see plan.
okay,
So there's a step change, I mean, inside of teachers' contracts, there's a step for everyone who's not on the top step.
well, no, I'm
Regardless
talking
of-
about-
You're talking, okay,
Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah. Okay, so in the past then, has it been the practice that it's a contingency line, but is that a contingency line that's like in our like overall year-over-year increase?
No, the contingency line doesn't live on. So the contingency line lives in another portion of the city budget.
Okay,
This is my understanding.
First year.
The first, and then after that, once we move into the next cycle,
yeah,
and then what the budget gets updated later. We don't wait all the way to the next cycle.
okay,
The budget gets updated later to move the money from the contingency into the department
Okay.
that needed to offset.
It's an actual
costs.
transfer of funds from the city to us, and we increase our budget by that.
And then, yes, and so then we appear, so if you looked at our past budget, several months later, you look back at what we have now
Here's my.
in our line item, and now it looks bigger than it did when we got started.
okay. I guess what I'm getting at is what the city manager is doing unique this year. This is,
So I would say this, the process, and I can't go back in time, so let's just,
Yeah.
separate from anything connected with COLA, that is, so my experience of the process since I've been here, and then my understanding of the process in the short term before I got here, was what we had done in the past, which is we would build our budget through the fall. We come to what we're gonna do, we come to you guys, January, February, is this conversation with all of you, that is, at that time, there is not a public, like, this is the line type of conversation. But there's a little bit of, there is some conversation, casual conversation about like, what do we think is gonna work this year? And that kind of happens. And then we come to whatever conclusions we come to. Then we would be in the first week in March, the business manager and I would be going down to speak to the city manager to talk about what the board had passed. We come to what, and then the city manager comes to a conclusion about what is the city manager going to present as their budget.
Mm.
And that becomes the default conversation.
Yeah.
That is difficult to muscle in on,
Yeah.
to say, the city manager says
Okay.
this, but here's this other stuff the board would like to do, students.
Okay.
So-
So I think,
This is an unusual season in
Yeah.
terms of process, and it's an unusual season in terms of the rigidness of the request.
Richard did, okay, so I'm gonna talk about that in a second.
Okay.
But I just want to, if what is happening this year is unique relative to, the city manager covering these costs of living that's gonna come through tuition negotiations, I don't think that should happen. I think it should be part of what we're passing, because the taxpayer is paying for it one way or the other, and we should be transparent and representative of it. And the council should, I feel like we're hiding it, is what it feels like to me. And I think it's dangerous because it sets a precedent that could be taken away, right? And used in like, you know, future school board member who's dealing with its negotiation year. And there's a council or a city manager that is not deferential in that way, right? I think you're setting yourself up for like a serious problem. So I really have a problem with it. I completely understand the what quote we're getting is the ability to know for contracts. Like I understand that that's like an important thing. We want to be able to hand the contracts out on April 1st, and this is one way we're getting there. But I think there is we paid Piper on that, you know, in the future. So onto the council process, there's the guidance, right? Okay, so there's been guidances in the past given by councils. I had a conversation with the city councilor today about guidance. I think it was last year in the fire department. And it was like, I forget what the number they put last year with 4%. Fire department's like, we need 11, right? We have a conversation, and that is justified for whatever reasons. And so there's fundamentally not an expectation, because we know from historic precedent that just because the guidance number is set, that it necessarily has to be met, right? So I think that being the premise of how we've been operating since the guidance has been set, is a problem. But also I was talking to Carrie earlier about this, about like, did it feel this year that guidance was more stern than previous years, right? Maybe that's the case, but I have a huge problem with that, because how can we have this fuzzy level of guidance strength? Like, what is that meter, right?
Right.
And so I think the council process needs adjustment. And I was really looking forward to the work session with the council to specifically talk about this, right? Which is, we need to have no number of positions by April, right? Your budget's not passed till June. How in God's name has this been working for so many years, right? And I think we're in a situation this year because of reevaluations, putting pressure on council, putting like a more stern percentage. And now we're in this position where the process is breaking down because fundamentally it's flawed. And so what I really want to have happen going forward, because I don't know what we can do. Well, we certainly can't get some of the people who took the buyout back, right? Like, that ship has sailed. And in my perspective, I just want to say I think damage is done, and like I'm not particularly happy about it. I think so, and I think that was specifically responding to the guidance of the council in a way, because it was like more stern this year, which is, again, like I said, not. There's no it's fuzzy, there's no like definition to that. So all that to say, I don't know that I can vote for a budget that's not going to include the COLA in it, that's not going to be transparent about what we're actually spending. I don't think that that's really responsible to do. And then second is, I don't know how we can do, I don't know if we should I don't know what the process is, if we need to talk more at council, but I think we should start probably this summer talking about FY 27, right? In terms of finding a way to get on the same page, right? Because we're so far behind.
And I would say that one, I think there's universal agreement on that. And that's a thing that's been pushed from the beginning. It's like, we can't, you can't,
Yeah.
you can't come to us in January.
Yeah.
When we're supposed to be halfway done with the formal process with the ward and all done with months of other work that we would do
Yeah.
to strategically respond to the council saying, this is about where we think
Yeah.
we would be. That pulls that all out. So then we're in a place where we need to decide either we're going to respond or not. I would say this, my experience, my concern in the situation that we're in is that if we do not respond, that we're gonna create, we get into a very fuzzy situation. We're going back to Tish's scenario where I worry about staff losses, where people are not gonna wait.
Yeah, I just feel like we're held hostage here.
I agree. I agree that that there's flaws in the process, for sure. I do.
Yeah.
I think, just we are, and I am trying to do the best I can with a flawed process and trying to read the tea leaves around what gets us the best possible result in the lousy situation that we're in. And then through that process, then speaking loudly about the fact that
Yeah.
we can't continue.
Here's, and this is the lousy place, I was going back with the council today, the lousy place that we're in, right? And ultimately what we're saying is the lousy place that we're in is because there's a 2.9% guidance. And the response I was getting to the counselor was, you're the school board, set the budget you want. And that is a circle.
Right.
Right? And that is not, like, there's no winning there. And that's what I mean by held hostage.
That's what we traditionally do.
Okay, let's,
Yeah.
are you finished?
Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa.
Everything Byron said, double that. I feel like so many people have raised things that I fundamentally agree with, and I'm trying to react from a sort of like 20,000-foot perspective instead of the vantage point of my own two kids in the school. Because if I put my parent hat on for a moment, let's just say the hard thing. Like, when I look at this list, this isn't a budget. These are mentors to my kids. Like, these are people who are the trusted adults for my own kids. Like, we say that we're in the business of serving kids, and they're the customer. I mean, we absolutely love our teachers. We love our staff. We want to preserve jobs. But our number one responsibility as a board is the kids. And I don't think that this serves kids. And we have traditionally in Portsmouth for years, to be honest, sometimes to an extent that I wasn't always sure I agreed with, we have said our number one value, particularly at the high school, is student voice and choice. We have intentionally for years built up a really strong curriculum across a broad array of subjects with the very intentional goal of having every single kid who walks through those doors look around and find their place. And every time we start to whittle away, even if it's just the one kid who they have to take 2 credits of gym and what they dream about is learning yoga, I know it's one class. Or what Nathan said about computer, yearbook as a class means for the kids that hate coding, there's a computer class that they can take. So these aren't like abstract, minimal reductions in the daily quality of life for our students. And I just feel like we'd be remiss to not just say that. I feel like it's very hard as a taxpayer. My own taxes went up a ton, that sucks and is very frustrating at our dinner table when we're doing our family budget. I fully respect how people could be agitated in our community about the bills and looking for ways for us to be more efficient. I do agree with Tish about the question around class size, not so much because I think we need to cut class size, but that I don't think we should be making budget decisions without knowing what the class sizes are. You know, and I think, you know, we talk about, you know, which of these positions we may or may not need. But if we're driving things by student choices, do these even align with what kids are picking? And do we know that? And maybe we do, and that's just not what's been articulated, but it feels uncomfortable if we're continuing to say that our value is what kids want to be able to learn and do. Is this in line with that? And I'm not sure it is. I also really worry about the idea that we're cutting all of these positions and every single one is pretty much a position with kids. And I don't see any cuts in staff, in administrative positions, in clerical positions, and other positions throughout the building. And I'm not saying we shouldn't value those jobs, but I'm just saying I'm a little surprised that every single thing we're taking away is a classroom and learning opportunity for a kid in some way, with the exception of one of these roles, when you get rid of two or two roles. You know what I mean? It just feels like it is tipped, at least from my personal perspective, too far towards the part of the thing that's our main job, which is serving kids. And I understand that there are people in the buildings who do incredibly hard jobs all day that aren't directly teaching kids, and they're really important jobs. But so is, you know, some of these teaching positions.
Sure.
You know, and when I hear us talking about world languages, I know many of us on the board for years have been saying, what's the K-12 world languages plan? We still don't know what that plan is, and yet we're very comfortable eliminating a language job. You know, when we said that one of our goals in the strategic planning was to have kids be career and college ready and be global citizens, and we're taking away, you know, a significant aspect of their global education when we're cutting back on languages. And, you know, we may have trouble at the entry level. We also may have trouble at the upper levels because kids need, you know, 2 credits or 3 credits of language to graduate? You probably know better than I do.
Right.
Okay, they need 3. So if they have to have 3,
Well,
from where they start. So if they start at like level, I don't know.
Yeah.
But they don't need Italian 5 or like French 6 to graduate. So I worry that we're giving up on the rigor of world languages down the line if we start to cut back on staffing. And I guess, I don't know, like this just feels, it feels hard for me. And I fully respect that we don't want to put anyone in a position of being told on April 1st that we can't guarantee your contract. But I also just feel really uncomfortable with telling our kids right now who are registering for classes for next year and see on this list teachers they were expecting to take classes with, and they know that these teachers are the only humans who teach those things. What are we doing for that piece? And I'm not saying there's not a solution for it, but it's not a simple solution. You know, and I'm not loving that aspect of it personally. And I think I really also am curious with the guidance from the council. Some years they have told us we don't want to see any new jobs, or we want to see a certain number of positions eliminated. I don't believe that was our guidance. I believe our guidance was 2.9. And I know you did a lot of hard things to try to see what you could whittle away at, but did they tell us we had to cut jobs?
I believe in at least Counselor Tabor's comments, the conversation started with 3.5% and no additional FTEs without a switch out.
Well, no,
So-
additional and cutting are not the same thing.
No, I understand.
Right.
I understand that. But
Okay.
that was the conversation.
Okay.
So
So I guess I would say all of that. I don't even know if I have a question, but it's a frustrating position, and I'm trying to decide what our responsibility is. And I feel like it should be kids.
yeah, no, I totally appreciate where you're coming from. I mean, we can. I appreciate what you're saying, all of you. And you lose some control over the process as soon as you're done.
Yeah.
So what I don't want to have happen is, I don't want to have a situation where once I leave this arena and I go out into the next part, that we go with, it's like what we think is, everything that we had in originally, the requests, we had a bunch of requests from principals we didn't talk to you about, right? That some of those things should be in. And then we go with all that stuff, and I go to have a conversation about what is going to be included in the manager's budget. And it's like, okay, 3.1, And so this is, now you need to tell me, this is what would happen. You need to tell me, Zach, which of these things, if I limited what you were gonna be able to do in my suggestion to 3.1%, what would those things be? Now, I'm not in a position to just be like, well, we're not playing your game. You know, we're gonna walk. So I've got to say, this is what, if we're limited to that, this is what it would be. Then I have the opportunity at the council level to have some conversation, but it would be, here's the default conversations in the manager's budget. Here, yes, I'm in support of what the manager's already doing for us, and here's the other couple $1 million that we
It's
should.
just, it's not how the charter is written. We're supposed to pass a budget that's like.
That's fine, and we can do that.
Yeah.
We can totally do that. We can totally do that. And maybe it's my kind of trying to game what the system is and think about what's most likely in terms of outcome and what is gonna do what things that we do and what's the impact gonna be on the actual school year next year when we're all done and we finished. And through that process, what does it look like? And what do I think is gonna happen? And how, not just like, what are we gonna receive, but what are gonna be the impacts on people who are here right now, who are in this kind of tough position? What do I think's, what's gonna happen in our hiring process? All those things are what I'm trying to incorporate. And so I wanted to give you an opportunity to consider something now I understand the buyout's a thing that's actually happened. There's no rolling it back. But I want to give you the opportunity to consider something that would get you to a point where the manager would be in support of what we're doing. And it's most shaped by us. That's my goal. But I don't want to take away your elected officials, and I don't want to take away I work for you. So I want you to.
If you
do
want
what
to
you
have
do.
your back, I
Yeah.
feel like we have two terrible choices here.
Yeah.
One is to sacrifice some aspects of kids' educational experience in order to preserve as many jobs as we can by giving people that job security, because the job security is important.
Yep.
Or we tell the council it's, whatever number we tell them above 2.9.
Right.
And then we're in a different type of bad situation. It just doesn't feel like either choice is good. And I wanted to share one factual thing, the contracts, I think they get them mid-April and return them back to you April 30th.
Okay, we haven't heard from, thank you, Lisa. We haven't heard from Pip. Would you like to
Yes.
chime in?
So, Zach, you said we lose control of the process when we hand it over to you to hand over to the city. But I feel like we've already lost control of it.
Right.
And granted, I haven't been at the other meetings, so I apologize for missing those. But was there consensus on the decision to ask for the buyouts?
So in the meeting, I talked about the fact that we would I want to also make sure that Liz had talked about the fact that Councilor Kirk came and talked about buyouts, and so we hopped to do buyouts. We were talking about buyouts. We've been talking about that as possibly a year from now was ideally where I wanted to be. But in trying, so then I did think about and I decided to do was to move it up. Talked about it with this group. You guys weren't here, but I did say, I'm going to go do a buyout. I'm not going to be in a position time-wise to come back to you about the structure of what that is. We didn't vote on that. But I said, is that something that's acceptable? There was no dissenting voice in the room when that happened. And then I went off and did that. So that's just in terms of kind of how that all came about. That's how it came about.
Okay. And you said you were looking to do them in a year from now. How come?
So I think that in terms of what thought process we were looking at as a larger team, we've been having dialogue about really for about a year and a half, was that if we want to do some restructuring in terms of the way in which we've got the kind of things set up, the best way to do it would be offer a buyout, tell people about a buyout in the spring and say, you need to tell us by like September 30th. So then we know months and months in advance of what this process is going to be, people who are potentially coming off the board, and then we can think strategically about how are we repurposing those FTEs Not to reduce all those FTEs, but maybe a couple, maybe. But that if we had 10 people who took a buyout and we knew that on September 1, then we're having a really long conversation across the fall about, okay, how can we strategically restructure our staffing patterns to best accomplish the goals of the strategic plan, or identify other weaknesses that we're seeing and plug those holes, that type of thing. That was where we wanted to be. So we were not having, I had some of this on the side conversations with folks here, but we as a leadership team a couple times had talked about that as a possibility, and that was the kind of the hope. And then when we ran into kind of the buzzsaw of this situation, we slid it up. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, that makes me feel better that it was something you were considering anyway, because it feels, what it feels to me has happened is sort of this like very arbitrary selection of who we're letting go, instead of a really systematic look at where our inefficiencies are, where we can reshape things to slim down. But now people have sort of like self-selected into this, and I was, like Lisa said, I was really sad personally to see this list, because
Sure.
I think we're losing really valuable people. And so I think, I completely agree with Nathan, and I really share a lot of the concerns that were voiced already about the changes that we're looking at this level of cuts. But as I understand it, this is a done deal already, right? So these,
It's not a done deal. None of this.
but these.
You guys
people
don't, well, the people who have offered have taken the buyout.
They've taken.
They've taken the buyout.
Yeah.
Right.
Change.
So that's happened, but those positions are still, if you decided to pass a different budget, fairly the way to describe it is proposal, that would go on beyond you out to the rest of the process. And ultimately we were to prevail, then we could fill all those positions. If you included additional money, we could include other positions, like all the ones that we didn't even bring to you as part of the process, because we felt like we couldn't start there because of what we felt it was. I'll accept the responsibility. I felt that it was not realistic that we were going to get through, if you tack on things that we were talking about, then we were going to be in a position where we would get through the process with a 6% budget. Just didn't think that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so if that wasn't going to happen, then how can I help kind of lead you through a path that gets you to the stuff that most reflects what we want to be able to do for kids in a way that is realistically considers the process and the operational impacts of the timeline of when we're doing things and how those things roll out. So I'll accept all responsibility for anything that people are upset about in terms of trying to respond to the city council events.
Well, and I guess my only other major concern is that I feel like there's sort of this continuous stepping back and walking away from our commitment to wellness. I just am like devastated to see that position on this list. And I hear your thoughts on sort of how the position itself maybe isn't defined well enough. I honestly got that impression during the strategic plan that it wasn't. But I think Pittsburgh brings up an excellent point, which is that the potential for that position is enormous across our district. And specifically in our strategic plan, carrying out some of those things. I feel like, last year we lost the outdoor ed position. We've lost a counselor already. We're talking about losing the wellness coordinator. I mean, how can we say we're a district that values student wellness when we keep letting go of the things that help our students be well? I mean, the yoga teacher's gone too. I mean, it's almost laughable for us to say we value student wellness as one of our core pillars and then make these changes. And we just keep doing it in the wrong direction. And I can't in good conscience support a budget that does that again, because we just did that last year. So that's where I stand on that.
Okay, shall we move on? We have to move on. How about to what? To what we're gonna do? I think we need.
But I have some comments about what I like, as after we kind of just went over everything, I have some follow-up about like what I'd like, more information I'd like. So I don't know if Carrie is on the same sentiment. I know she's
It's not long. I know it's been long, but after Liz,
Yeah.
you just got a minute.
All right.
Yeah, I think.
Liz, Terry, and then Nathan.
I think I'd like to know what the principal's requests are, because I don't know that those have been laid on the table. I don't know. And so I'm concerned that there's maybe things that are going toward, like, things towards the strategic plan, things that the principals are requesting that we have no idea
Oh,
about.
actually, strike that. We did in our original presentation included what those were.
Yeah.
That's where it's anywhere.
That up.
Okay.
It's in there.
All right, so I'll pull that back up. I think we need to revisit those things in the bigger discussion. I also worry that, you know, we're getting rid of a tech ed position, and I've talked to, when I talked to the tech ed teacher that came on, she was saying how some of our equipment's not modernized compared to other schools. Like, we might need to revamp some of that equipment as well. The French teacher in the high school, the middle school's kids, I mean, I only speak for my son, but from what I hear, they love the French program at the middle school, and obviously that's a feeder situation into the high school. So I think there was some points made about that I don't know how this is following with our strategic plan or our plan to have a cohesive curriculum that feeds into the high school if we're just sort of kind of chopping here, chopping there because it's convenient. And I worry that we're not fully addressing the strategic plan. So, I'd like to go back and address some of these positions that are the requests of the principals. I think there was one, I vaguely remember that there was one where would I find that? Is it in the binder?
It's in the first
What?
budget meeting in January.
Is it in the binder?
Yes.
Okay, what page?
All right, we don't have time for that right
I guess,
now.
well, I thought there was like an OT request.
I think it's on page 13.
13, yeah, we got a sped request at Little Harbor, para ed at Don Darrow, a sped teacher at PMS, PMS projector replacements, a quarter nurse, a program aid for CTE, which is a program that we need to build and continue to grow to be comparable to other schools. DW instrumental musical specialist, add sister school trips, and a maintenance supervisor. Again, the maintenance supervisor is continually being cut, and we have more and more ground to cover for Ken Lynchy. And so I would like to have a conversation about, okay, maybe this is a starting point, but what can we add back in? Do we present 4%? I just think this whole process I think we need to go back to what we have been doing traditionally, which is they give a guidance and we say, okay, we heard you on your guidance, but our budget is 4.99%, and this is what we're presenting to you. So you can kick it back to us. And I appreciate what you're doing, Zach, but I think we're elected, and that's really one of our only things that we can do as a board is to develop a budget based on what community members are telling us and what they're requesting. So, and what our teachers need and whatnot. So I appreciate the hard position that you're in, but I think, it's our job as a board to consider what is being requested from everybody and not just, nickel and dime or cut here and there just to make whatever is happening for the city council. So I'd like to revisit the request from the principals.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Terry, and then Nathan. And Pip, did you want to talk again?
I disagree with not being comfortable with the cuts in general, but I have some sort of specific questions around the memo. And then so I remember, so this is the fourth budget year that I've been here. I remember that an additional high school counselor being like a hard fought, really challenging phenomenon to get. And I really want to caution that one in particular. I think all of these positions are really important to replace, to be honest. I don't know all the mechanics of how this works in the scheduling, but computer and programming and coding and things like that is really like one of those special homes for folks that may not find another home. So when we talk about like individual pathways, I think it's really important. Those offerings are really easily accessible. I wanted to ask specifically about the Italian, like, relationship and the budgeting and the, like, I know that we've had grants in the past that have covered portion of instruction.
Yep.
And that has sort of been the driver of Italian being the elementary language that is offered, and where do we fit with that? Do you want me to ask all my questions or?
So Brian, I need you to help me, maybe if you can help me on the percentages of what we're covering for the elementary staff right now. 1.5 elementary positions at the moment. Portions of which I'll wait for, maybe, and we might be able to do it on the fly, we might not. And then we have been offered the opportunity next year, if we wanted to pay for a another half-time middle school person if we wanted to. Okay. And so if we were to pursue that, then what we would do is we would make the Italian, we would look at the possibility of expanding one of the positions we have covered. To have the opportunity in the middle. If we were to decide that we were interested in a language that was not Italian and want to go in a different direction, then we would put in a request through the local budget for Spanish teachers at schools, and we would fund it through the local budget. But I don't have currently a funding source who's willing to pay for, 2 teachers to cover that in some other language.
And then the architecture CTE piece, I noticed that's replaced and not a reduction, and I'm just.
No, that's a reduction.
No, at the middle school, it was a reduction. Was that just a typo?
Where's
The high school architecture teacher.
CTE.
Yeah.
He's a bio, but he's not
That was
showing it.
buyout.
Not showing
Oh, so
reductions.
he should show as a reduction.
So it's 9. What?
So-
we're putting more?
Hold on.
Great.
And so if that is the case,
Yeah.
is cutting that program, having fewer CTE offerings, I mean, like, does that affect our overall, like, the funds coming in for renovating CTE, all of the qualifications, et cetera?
So it doesn't, we still are eligible for, we're still centering, we're eligible for funds. I don't know that there's a direct impact on the amount of funds. It's a result of the number of programs. So it's also not necessarily our intent to not offer another CTE program, perhaps. There was conversation, we knew that this particular teacher might be retiring in the near future. So one of the conversations that had been happening is what's our ability to develop a building trades program at the high school? It does not exist at the moment. But we're not in a position to deliver that next year. So, but it is a mistake on my part if the intent is that the CTE architecture would be included in the set of reductions that we're talking about. And I'm just trying to make sure
That teacher was planning on it.
that teacher would come to us and
The incentive moved it up here.
But we're only keeping 3 of those jobs out of the.
Yeah, give me just a minute to double check.
What are we doing? We're keeping
Oh.
the nurse, Italian,
Well, there's 11.
and the Lister teacher, right?
Lister stays,
Nurse stays.
nurse stays, Lister stays, Italian
Special education.
stays, special education stays. Let's see,
Special education is Lister, or is that also? student?
no, it's 2
Oh, I see,
high school
yeah.
special education teacher as well.
Okay,
So
nurse. Days.
So it's 4.
That doesn't matter.
It doesn't match up.
hold on.
There's 11 on the incentive list. There's 6 that were in the buyout on the reduction list. That means there's 5 replacements.
Yeah, there should be, the original intent would include the CTE position. So I'm
So who-
gonna rework it to make
Who were
sure.
the 5 that would be maintained? The Italian?
So it's Italian, so from this list, Italian would be, we would plan to rehire. The school nurse at the high school, we would plan to rehire. The special educator at the high school would plan to rehire. The reading teacher / special educator at Lister, we would plan to rehire.
That's 4.
That's 4.
Yeah.
Didn't you say there were 5?
I fit 4, I thought it was 4
Okay.
and 7.
Okay. Okay, who else would like to speak before we move on? Okay, let's give Pip another turn. Oh, Carrie, are you finished?
Have one more, but it's not, so yes.
No, why don't you go ahead and then we'll do Pip and then we'll do Liz and then we'll try to move on here.
And Nathan, don't forget.
Oh, Nathan.
From Eric too. I don't know if you have any thoughts, but I mean, we haven't heard from him at
I
all.
was trying to say something about Zach, that those positions that these are, in my understanding, it would be the principals that are signing that, hey, these are retirees, are we gonna fill these positions? And then they're directed by the administration of whether they're gonna fill that or not, and they're letting you know that. Right?
On, so for that, like for the,
So say for the high school, for example, like Steve would be saying like, we're gonna maybe reallocate positions next year.
yeah, I mean, and I think that for the, so in terms of the, when we're talking before about reallocating around the counseling stuff. So I have had a conversation with Steve and that's
Right.
informed by a conversation with Steve.
So, cause like the conversation here is a lot of these people being upset about positions, but the way I would interpret it is that these people are retiring and it's the school administrators who are deciding we are gonna fill this position or we're gonna move on to do something else or whatever.
Yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, so the 4, so like we would be in terms of if for the purposes of if we were trying to hit this 2.9 number and it's different incarnations, but if we were trying to hit the 2.9 number, then we would not fill the 7. We would go back, and we wouldn't reallocate them to do something else.
Right.
Like it just, we wouldn't have those roles anymore. The 4 we would rehire. You know, but the board has the ability to say, well, we're gonna continue to spend it. We want to spend at the same level. And then we would reallocate some of those roles.
Right.
Yeah.
But a lot of things factors go into that in regards to like enrollment in courses.
Yeah,
that's what I was. And then just to piggyback on what Nate said earlier. Photography is actually a computer option as well for students, so there is more options than just
one. Yeah.
Thank you. Carrie, did you finish Pip? And then Liz and Lisa.
Nathan's been.
Oh, Nathan, I thought that's what you wanted to say. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I'm gonna do my best to just keep it straightforward. What you just said, Dr. McLaughlin, with keeping it at 2.9, I want you guys to all hear this from a student. I don't think you can confidently say that Portsmouth High School is in the capability of providing its needs for students next year and the year after and the year after that to make sure that they all properly graduate and have the opportunities that they deserve at Portsmouth High School with all the values that we have in our strategic plan. If you have to wait till junior year to get into a level 1 French class and you've always wanted to minor in French in college, but you can't get to the 3 credits or a level 3 French class because you don't have a teacher to teach it. Or a computer class, any example. You can't confidently say that you can provide what you need to for students. And if you need me to say that on student government day at our mock meeting to city council to be like, we literally can't act properly as a school to provide what we need, that's what I'll do. And I don't think you can't propose this. You just can't. It's not possible to run a school without these positions. In architecture, yeah, let's put that in too. You can't take any architecture classes in high school, but then you're just jumping into college and you haven't taken any because they weren't offered. You're gonna just have people leaving and going to private schools after that if that's what they want to do. So Yeah, that was a lot. I'm sorry, but.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank
Fill it.
thank you.
You're hired.
Yeah. Who was next? Harry, did you have one more question?
No.
Then Pip and Liz and Lisa. And then Brian.
I'm so appreciative that Nathan is here, and I think his perspective highlights what one of our community members said earlier, which is that people come to the community because the schools are strong. That's what makes our property values high. That's what draws people to this community. That's what draws employees to this community. And I think I agree with all of those who have said that this process has just kind of really been messed up this year. And I am really disappointed by that, because I do think we're in a bind, but I think Nathan's absolutely right. I don't think it's fair of us to say that we can run our schools this way because we can't. We all know that we're losing valuable people and valuable experiences for the students. So I don't think we'd be doing our job as elected members of the school board to pass a budget that doesn't reflect what our students need. So I think we have to do what we've done before and present a budget that we think is reasonable and keep it as tight as we possibly can, but do it in a way that at least reflects our values as a community. Hopefully, council will support them. I'm sorry, I have one request, which is if we could look at another way to find $98,000 instead of losing our wellness coordinator, I would really appreciate that.
Okay, next I have Liz.
Sorry, I just want to circle back since the architecture was thrown in there too. I agree with Nathan because I've met some architecture students in other schools as well who have been able to advance their interest in architecture and what they're able to do and, you know, basically propel them. I understand what you're saying as far as, you know, wanting to have some sort of cohesive program and building the trades and whatnot, but I am concerned with completely eliminating that and not adding something in, especially for students that may have already just started. You know, they started this year, next thing you know, they don't have it their senior year when that's something that's important to them. So I am concerned with that. I also am concerned with what's happening at the state level with the school vouchers. I don't know if many of you noticed at all, but in the past, over the summer, there's been a voucher program for summer education for students. That website is not available right now. So a lot of families are being affected by not being able to provide high quality summer programming or having that little extra assistance to provide programming. But I think what's happening is this is an overall voucher program and, you know, students are going to go places that are going to offer them the architecture or going to offer XYZ. And I do think Portsmouth is behind comparably to other schools in the surrounding area based on my conversations and my experiences with what other schools are doing in CTE or in, you know, some of these specialty programs in other districts. And I do worry that we're behind there. And honestly, people have asked if I'm going to run again for next year. I've considered moving myself if the programs are going to be better. And I think to the community members' point, you know, that's what drives the community and the property values up. I do want to have a budget that includes some of these requests from the principals. So I know in the past, we've gotten these like orange sheets from Nate. Like, here's our budget, here's the whole budget, here's, you know, what we want to add in, here's the cost of adding this in. I'd like to see that, like all of these requests and what's up for discussion, like all on one sheet. Like what's considered being cut, what's there, and so that we could, as a board, go line by line and say, like I have every year, I want to add the maintenance supervisor position in. I want to keep the architecture position in. I want to keep that. Okay, maybe I don't fully agree with this wellness coordinator. Maybe I want somebody that's more boots on the ground, you know, interfacing with students or something. I value that more than an admin position. But I'd like to go I'd like to have these all on one sheet and kind of like go line by line. That would be my preference for the next meeting. I don't know if we need to add another workshop session to our list, given that this budget, community members have said that it's not available to have another, public hearing added to this. I know it messes with the timeline. But I guess I would really like to see on one sheet the added requests. And also I think it gives a good visual for the council. Like this is what a 1.43 increase is what our admin are asking for. And, based on this, we're not giving them any of these positions and we're gonna cut all of these to meet wherever you're at. So instead, we propose, a 3.5 or 4%, where we're going to keep XYZ positions, cut this position, maybe we can cut the elementary teacher or whatever, and we're gonna add, vote to add a maintenance supervisor or, a special ed teacher that we need at Little Harbor or something to that effect. So I think that to me makes sense. And Nancy, that's what you're gonna get at next as far as where do we go from here, but that's what I would like, I think would be one of the most effective things in moving forward.
Break down every single one of those requests. Is in the binder. You just go back.
No, what I'm saying to you is that in the past, Nathan has given us an orange sheet, okay?
This is more descriptive.
No, I understand. I don't need a breakdown. What I'm requesting is what has been done in the past, because I think it gives a good visual to the council. So basically what I'm asking is you to take this sheet and then to take what Zach had tonight of the budget requests and like the line items of what these costs would be to fill these positions. And so it's like, I can grab the old budget binders and show you these orange and purple sheets that were pulled out that we've had, but it's just like a one pager that has every position that's being requested, the cost of the positions, that 1.43 increase, and then, what's being cut and how that's gonna add it up. So it's just like a one sheet kind of breakdown. And, I'm sure Nathan has it in the past, but I definitely have them at home. I'm happy to sort of send it over, but I think that gives a visual to all of us, as well as the community and the city council of here's where the requests are. Here's what the board is gonna line item, because we have in the past gone through and voted for, we wanna put this in the budget. And I feel like right now, we're having this conversation and we're not going through line by line saying, I want the sped teacher at Little Harbor, I don't want architecture, I want this. And I think that's what we need to do to as a board obligation to present the budget.
Okay, Liz, thank you. Let's move on to Lisa.
I feel like I'm taking this all in. I feel like we've got impossible decisions that all suck. And the fundamentally irreconcilable differences between two competing and, in my mind, pretty equally important and very major things we need to do for our district. And one is to preserve our excellent staff that we have, to make them not want to look for work because they're panicked, to make them know we value them, and to make them see from the budget we pass that we value them. And at the same time, we serve kids. And it feels like those two things are unfortunately being put in opposition by the guidance that we've been given. I do feel a little uncomfortable as a board with going through the process at this late stage of individually picking out specific things at this point to keep or not keep, because ultimately we pass a number. And then it's still going to come back to our superintendent and our administrative team to spend that money. So like we voted in the past to have a little bit of money extra for outdoor ed. We still don't have outdoor ed. And that was a decision that was made based on the needs at the time. I wanted outdoor ed. I voted for it. But it just feels like an exercise that's almost like not.
That was cut by the city.
No, I understand. I understand.
We'll make sure you didn't think we.
No, I'm not trying to play blame.
Didn't spend it.
But I guess my point is more like, we can certainly say we value this position over that position. And I could make so many compelling arguments for pretty much every one of these positions. We should support wellness. We should support the diversity of classes. Like kids already wait a long time when they need to see counselors about specific things to do those meetings when they need that. So making it harder is not a great thing. Like we could argue for all of this. But I guess I don't love the 2.9. I also don't love the idea of retreating so far from it that we lose the ability to tell all of our teachers that their contracts are being renewed if they didn't take a buyout. The buyouts are already a terrible situation to put people in, but at least they volunteered for that. And I guess my only ask for the next meeting is there any way to look at any other positions that aren't teachers that we could combine or reimagine? Because I'm not so comfortable voting for this. If we really need to ultimately find a way to get to 2.9, which I'm not 100% sure I agree with right now, but if we need to, I certainly don't like the idea of doing it and saying on paper that our intention is to do it all by cutting teachers. And
Which we
I
have it in
understand.
terms of positions. I mean,
no,
in terms
I,
of non-personnel cuts, you're right.
I
So if you
understand
want-
that.
If
But you
you
know
want
what
us to
I'm
hit
saying?
each category of employee, we can
I don't,
structure it, but we didn't, I just want to make sure it's clear that this is not exclusively what we cut.
I know that we've done a lot from operations in addition to that, that has helped to bring the number down, and I totally appreciate that. But I guess my question is from a personnel standpoint, if all we're targeting is primarily classroom jobs, I don't love that. If there are other things to cut, and you might say, I talked to my administrative team, we don't have other things to cut, then I guess tell us that, but it feels to me uncomfortable to not have
Okay.
at least explored that.
Yep.
And not because they aren't valuable either, but this feels unbalanced to me.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple meetings ago, I said I was all for voting for continuing everything that we're doing. So anything below that
Yep.
is
Yep.
would make me happy. And I just, when I look at, you and I talked about classroom teachers, just doesn't, it just feels like we're backing out on a promise to the kids, even though I get it, it's 15.5 versus 16. But when I put it in the context of the strategic plan, like, we're not moving forward, we're moving back. It seems like every year we're clawing, we were clawing for school psychologists and counselors, and here we are saying, well, we could probably get by with less. And I know what you're trying to do. I know you're trying to balance something that's really difficult. But very uncomfortable voting for that because of the way I, think about the strategic plan. So I'm not sure where we go from here. I'm not comfortable at the 2.9. I think something higher in order to at least accommodate classroom teachers at the elementary school, I'd be more comfortable with. School counselor, maybe at the high school, but not to tick it up a huge amount, but just something that at least accommodates something there. But I do think that if the administration has to come up with a game plan next year to say, and with working with us, saying, okay, the strategic plan is guiding us and saying, these are the positions that we need, or, curriculum is guiding us towards this, or whatever. In order to say, as soon as she comes and says, it's gonna be 2.9, right? We're immediately saying, this is what it has to be right now. This is what our, if we want to drive forward in excellence, and that's the reason we have a good school system right now. We have, some of the top elementary schools in the state is because of what we've been doing and spending. And yeah, our spending per pupil's higher, but we do have more seasoned teachers, and I understand that the percentages, like you said, are skewed because of that too. That's the blessing that we get. Attract top talent. It's just like a big, starting to become a slap in the face. So I'm thinking next year is really a year you have to figure out how to be proactive somehow. So you're all teed up for that message, whatever that message is. That requires our input as well. But it does feel like we're on our heels a little bit with this. But I have been in budget cycles where city council says 0%, right? They've said it before.
Yeah, we've done it before. We had
And
it.
it's not like the first time we've had it, and then somehow it's around 4, or so I think we do have the ability to push back. I understand the timing.
I'm worried about the timeline. That's
Yes, the timing got really. It is what it is at this point, to some degree. But I'm still uncomfortable with it, what we're talking about in terms of the numbers, and I would like to see a little bit on.
Can we come up with number. Right now, we're at 2.9. Can we all agree that that's not gonna fly?
Yes.
Is there anybody that thinks 2.9 flies?
28.5, right? That's whatever.
Okay, Brian or Zach, can I ask you, if we were to add these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 positions that we're proposing, we would cut, starting with the wellness coordinator and going down to the technology education teacher, what would the number be?
Well, the positions back.
4.31. 4.4.
If my count is right, I think that elementaries we're running at 55 classrooms. There's 58 on the books in our original proposed. So I think that actually puts it at primary classroom teachers.
Wait a minute, say that again.
Sorry. 55 primary classrooms are operating in the district, and we anticipated that going forward. And there's 58 in the proposed binder. And this modifies that to 55. So I don't think we're taking away an elementary classroom. It is like all shifting,
Are you saying we can go without these 2 elementary teachers?
in my opinion.
Okay, all right, can you give us, what would the number be with those 2 elementary teachers in there and without those 2 elementary teachers in there?
Ballpark 390.
Yeah, ballpark. With or without those 2 elementary teachers?
So if you, I guess I'd, with or without. What with or without? I mean, so each
What's the
elementary.
number if we had those 2 elementary teachers, if we did not?
So if you went from 4, Brian's non-personnel cuts, that's down to 4.46, Brian, is that what it was? 4.64, trying to recall.
In this whole.
4.46.
Is architecture in there?
Yes.
What are we doing though about like, for example, the para educator needs a Dondero. Dondero has identified this is.
Liz, we're not gonna go there yet. We're just trying to figure out these 7.
But hold on, Nancy, hold on.
Just we can talk about that after we go through these 7
But
positions.
these are obligations though that.
I know, but
based on
we'll
needs.
discuss that after we do this, okay? All right. Again, what is the number with the 2 elementary teachers and without, then the other number without the 2 elementary teachers? I mean, even if it's just ballpark,
So each elementary teacher, the ones that think about each of them as about 0.21%. Each one.
so if we keep them, it adds 0.42.
0.21%.
Okay,
Okay, I just wanna,
I'm trying to get us to a number,
I totally. I'm with-
because that's what we have to give to the.
But I'm.
Well, hold on, let me,
Yeah, Liz, wait a minute, Liz, stop.
let me get this out. I just wanna so everyone's on the same page. So I'm good with getting to a number, but, and this has been said by the mayor. And I verified it in the charter, which is that all money appropriated in the annual budget for the support of public schools is subject to the control of the school board, which will have line item control over its own budget.
Yes.
So ultimately, we don't have to come up, yes, there has to be a number, but we can put in specific line item. In our budget, we don't have to.
The city council does not
Yeah,
cut any of
Cut our lines.
yes,
they want to talk about, they talk
Bottom line.
they talk about specific things
yeah,
to justify a bottom line change.
okay.
That's what they do. They can't say you cannot have a French teacher at the high school.
What I'm saying is the agency between the administration and the school board, we at the school board have line item control over the budget the administration.
Yes.
Support us. So while we're looking for specific numbers here, and maybe this isn't constructive, but my thought is, let's just point to the line items, right? To the individual positions,
Well, that's what we're.
and then we just get a number.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what I'm
And it
trying to
also
do.
feels like we have high paid teachers at the top of the scale, some of them who took these
Right.
buyouts, and if we hire someone mid-career.
Right.
The hope is that we spend
say-
15,000 to offer this incentive. And that we may, at least for some of these positions that we feel, be able to hire at a rate
A lower
that
rate.
is lower. So there is some long-term savings to the city from that. And I think keeping that message front and center, if we go back to them with anything other than 2.9, would be really important to make sure we're messaging.
And I think they understand that, but you're right.
I think it's worth repeating really loud.
Liz, we're gonna go through these.
But can we talk, because they just talked, and I just want to be clear that some of these requests that are on page 13, let me just give one example. One example is that Don Darrow has identified a need for 4 paraeducators due to students coming from the PEAP program. So these have been students identified already with an IEP. That's just one example on the list of the page 13. And so there's a 1.43 increase that we're looking at there. So I feel like we're remiss in just playing around with the numbers from tonight and the cuts from tonight to not look at, we need to add these 4 paraeducators in. Likely, we need to add some of these other ones in too, the special ed needs, case managers and whatnot as well. So I think to try to get a number tonight based on.
How many people agree with Liz? Can we just ask how many people agree with Liz?
This is stuff that we have.
Starting point.
We have this stuff right now, and if we don't have it, there's gonna be a big problem.
Yeah.
Figure this out.
We
first.
don't have.
I would like.
No, what we're is it, yes, we have,
Though.
yes.
So my,
Does everybody agree with, well, we should talk about,
I would like to talk about the stuff that Liz is talking about, but I think we can do this exercise first and then we.
I agree.
what I said.
I agree.
Okay, all right, so if we keep these, if we look at these 7 positions, but take away the 2 elementary school teachers, what is the number?
And add the CTE. That's not on the memo.
So if you were to, so instead of
You mean
4,
the architect?
so if you were to remove the 2, so you go from 4.46 to 4.1.
If we take.
I mean, sorry, the 2 elementary teachers.
Yeah, you said it, yeah, 4.2, it would be 4.04 is what I have. If you take away the 2 elementary teachers.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about the architecture teacher. What would it cost if we add the architecture? Add the architect.
Give me-
Sure,
Tell you on that too. The
You just say 4.99.
Point-
4.04 is
point
what I'm at.
2%.
Yeah, say that again?
To add but the architecture teacher would not be at the existing salary, but based on the existing salary, it'd be 0.22%.
Okay, so that takes us up to 4.26. 4.26.
No.
So we have all of these,
Okay.
except for the 2 elementary teachers, plus we have the architecture teacher.
Well, except for the 3 elementary, really, it's the 2 plus the one that
Well,
doesn't
but
exist.
he's-
Okay.
we're not paying for that right now, anyway.
Just
So that's about.
that's unsure.
That's 4.26. Okay, and that includes
So I,
before what?
I would be.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yes.
This is swinging back to what I was talking about before. If the principals. The architecture teacher takes retirement.
Yep.
The principal makes a decision. We're not gonna fill that position.
Yep.
You guys as a school board are saying, we want to keep that position. But if Steve still says, I don't want to fill that position.
So basically what, I think we're having that conversation right now.
Question.
So I think in Byron's reading of the chart, it would be that then the board has control over that money, that's line item control. And basically it would be, you better go hire an architecture teacher if you don't work here anymore.
Well, actually, we tell you that,
So-
and you tell the principal that.
Right. But ultimately, I'm your employee. That's, yes.
I mean,
I'm the one you supervise.
the other thing to think about is I know that you're worried about contracts in April.
Yep.
But if you've already got these buyouts leveraged now, right?
Yeah.
You basically, your baseline case, so 2.9, then you still can get the contracts because this is the flow, right? That we're talking about.
You could, I mean, you could in terms of trying to position yourself, you could position this as the flow.
This is the flow, because you get the money back, then you can hire some of these people back, because that's what we're asking.
That's what, and that's what.
Just the longer we wait, the
I guess
pool is gonna deplete.
Well, I guess what I
I'm
guess,
just being a devil's advocate here.
yeah, no, I said, but at least the people who are already not on notice.
Knows
We're
that
gonna
they
have the
know
whole
their job.
25 contracts back, right? That's
Right.
what I'm saying, yeah.
Okay, so right now we're at 4.26. We have a meeting Tuesday night where we're supposed to vote on our budget. And to accommodate Liz's request, how about Brian, could you put that list for us and how much more it would cost if we added some of those principal requests?
We haven't applied from the first slideshow.
Okay.
That's a
900.
It's in the book.
Okay.
But I guess what I,
Look at that.
what I wanted though was that this and these other ones all on one sheet. Zach, you know what I'm talking about, those colored sheets?
I'll go back to try, I don't fully, I'm sure we've done it and I can back it down and make sure that we can replicate something.
Okay, does that sound like a plan? And then maybe we can discuss those and we're at 4.26 right now. Brian always wanted to be at 4.99. So maybe, or maybe we'll go above 5. I mean, how do we know? If we really think as a board that we should add 4 paraprofessionals at Dondero or the maintenance supervisor, if we think as a board we should do that,
Take away.
then we'll add to the 4.26. Liz and Kerry. Lisa.
I just wanna
Yeah.
second what Brian said about the float, because I would feel much more comfortable passing a budget where Zach feels confident that he can give our teachers their contract renewals. I would like to go as hard as we can to defend as much as we can without putting some of our staff in jeopardy. Because if we lose our new hire,
Like, oh, don't worry about it.
then we're gonna not be a place that people wanna come. It's not a very big state
Finance.
and,
Yeah.
we don't want to get a reputation
Well,
as somebody who cuts our teachers loose right after they come here.
So
And so I'd love to see that as part of it, but I also feel like there might be some places at the edges where we can just argue for that flow.
So the only thing about the float is, and there's, so here's the, so traditionally, this is kind of, I know some people who have not been part of the city system before. We were just meeting with the SAU 50 representatives on an area meeting, and we were talking about our process. And they were like, how does that even work? How do you hire people when the budget's not even approved yet? And you don't even know that you've got the money to cover this. How has that not been a disaster at some point along the way? And basically, it's just been through kind of people have just made it happen.
It's
one way or
because
another.
we've never had to face 10.
Right, so yeah,
That's really what it.
but people have been here for 20 years.
I tried to change it when I was on.
People have been here for
Not
20
me,
20 years. I know,
myself.
talking with Aaron, Bachman, who was here for 20 years, and said, my first, I can't remember whatever number of years, my first 5 years I was a teacher here, I got paid.
So it's gonna work out.
I got paint slipped every
Yeah.
single year.
Yeah.
And that was just the way it was. And some people said, well, it'll probably work out.
Yeah.
Just hang in there. And
They
that
don't
was,
need to
that was-
pass the budget
and that was
till
the-
June 30th.
and that was the culture, right?
They don't
So,
have to pass
so
it
all
till
those
June
things,
30th.
but what would be interesting is what we don't know is we hire people and then they pass money that's less than what we have hired. And then where are we at? So I don't know. And that all has the ability to, it might politically be a slim possibility. It may or may not be. But that could be possible. We go ahead, we have a float, and they're like, that's great, but we gave you less than the float. And you're already hired out beyond that. And now, and then we get into all kinds of interesting territory. I understand,
Well,
we might think the politics are that they wouldn't do that.
We're doing credit default swaps now.
For many of you young people to run for city council,
Feels like it.
change that portion of the chart. I tried, not me by myself, but a group of us tried and,
In terms of moving up to date or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Let's try
they
again.
get the budget now, but they don't have to vote on it till June 30th.
Well, they haven't, the manager's office hasn't even put it together yet.
Yeah,
So it's not.
so, well, it's close. I mean, it must
Okay,
be.
but I mean, they put it, it's in the people's hands by the 20th.
You have to move the physical year.
Yeah.
But if we go together as a group to say amend the charter and bring a motion forward to put on their agenda,
Well, that's a good idea.
I mean, if we figure out what that looks like, we can do it.
Carrie.
You can vote yes or no, but
One request, for in our next meeting, Brian, can you just estimate the cost savings of the buyout? meaning like hiring someone with 1 to 2 years experience or something like that instead.
So only thing I'd say about that is we have yet to. I'd give us a specific cap because we've never put a cap on hiring. So we've never said you can only hire up to step 5. You can't hire anybody with a master's. Now, there are schools even closer to Boston, that's common. Like you go into a hiring season, and it's like you can't do anything other than it has to be master's, step 5 or lower. Now, that has been something that this place has never done. So
I,
Could you
I,
give us a
not-
specific-
you are in the weeds of hiring. I am in the advocacy place of we estimate X. I'm not a promise, not a.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah, yeah.
Error, just a general estimate. So I don't foresee putting any of those things and I don't think legally we can, so.
no, we can. I mean, we can say we're only hiring. I mean, that's again.
Well, let's not go there because that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay, good.
I just have a comment. If we come in at 4.26, or if we add a few things on Tuesday night, is the council gonna say we're taking away the COLA money we're giving you?
Who knows? They do whatever they want.
If we had to add 1.3 million to 4.26 or whatever we come up with on Tuesday night, that's gonna be well over 5,
Again.
correct?
Again, we're talking about getting rid of positions even at 4.2, you know what I mean?
Yep.
That again?
Sure.
We're talking about getting rid of positions at 4.2.
This is,
That's the bottom
yeah,
line.
and that's what was so frustrating about last night,
Yeah.
was the position of the council that it was all solved.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
they definitely.
We don't need a workshop.
Yeah, we don't need the workshop because we've solved this. And we've solved it in such a way, you know, everyone gets what they want, which was like, is just like, yeah, no.
Yeah, well, I agree, but I think they were feeling that everybody was working together on this, including police and fire, is what I'm hearing.
That's true too.
What I'm
That is true.
hearing
It's not just us.
Fire, it really whittled down. Police, they need 6 more police officers. They're down 6 police officers. Fire is, the personnel is great. They're at where they should be. But, you know, police is hurting and they're, you know, so but we're the board and we have a right to come in with a number that
you do.
we think, as you've all said, you know, we think is reasonable and is gonna be able for us to deliver the services that we want to deliver.
I have a quick question about this.
Yeah.
Is it possible for us to, I know there were concerns expressed about or not including it, and I didn't get to say this, but I agree that having it not be visible as part of our budget scares me. But is it possible to propose a budget that says X% plus COLA? And so that they will know, I mean, so that they can approve our budget as we've presented it, but also approve accepting that the COLA is undetermined at this point.
So I think the COLA estimates. Yeah, I mean, some of it's, I don't mean the disparagement, it's kind of semantics. I think our 2.9, what we were talking about in terms of the 2.9 is the 2.9 plus COLA.
Right, because
So that's what it is.
they're
So-
saying they're gonna do
Right.
that anyway.
So if
I
we're
guess
doing,
my
we're
point
talking
is-
about like the 4.6, it's 4.6 plus COLA.
Right,
Or
but it is
4.26.
either way, right?
Yeah.
So, but I guess what I'm saying is I want them to approve our budget, including the COLA, so that we can then, whenever we know what it is, we can share it and say that's part of our budget for the next year, because as people pointed out, if we're not including it this year,
This is an interesting piece. No, you're right, but it does get
It does
adjusted.
get included, it's adjusted, so next year it's baked in.
Will
So
be an
so it won't be, so it's weird, but I hear what you're saying. So it's like if it wasn't, and then you come the next year and it's like, oh, we're an 8 because we had this other thing that wasn't,
right?
we're not, because
Percentage.
the starting point for our the conversations next year, if you looked at the current year's budget, it was slid in after the fact. So it's a mechanism that does that. It's a little weird, but that's how it's
Okay,
done. So we don't have to worry about it being like double penalty against us next year.
So it raises the floor after we pass it, essentially.
Essentially, yes. So the floor, next year's floor of the conversation.
It's like, it's
So
like
it's
3%.
So is it,
Next year, when we look at our budget
So-
for this year.
so
Yeah.
it's good in some ways. It's them having pulled it out is good at the initial conversation, it's in built into the floor next year.
Yeah.
And in every other, in the non-city districts,
Tuesday.
it's a separate ballot item, it's a separate cost item. When it passes, then it gets added on to the general budget. It's Same concept, it's just, because we're in a city, it's a different process.
Got it.
Oh, let's send out a.
Good.
I was just wondering how complex our agenda was for Tuesday night. Brian's looking it up.
Good stuff.
I don't think it's huge, though, if I remember correctly.
We've got principals, elementary principals coming to talk about the kind of the curricular work. I don't know, it's not a
Okay, we'll figure it out.
I
nothing.
have a question.
Yes.
So I know we heard from Ken Lynchy, we heard from special ed, I don't feel like we've heard from a lot of people like we, in the past, I feel like maybe we've heard from more, but here's my concern or my question is that there is some really great explanations about these requested positions.
Yep.
But I feel like they haven't been fully highlighted to the board. I mean, they're highlighted in the memos, right? But we're not having a conversation about how, you know, as a community, you know, we're a huge restaurant community and our culinary program is busting at the seams and they're requesting an aid. And so we can only seat 72 students. However, if we have this aid, we can do 144, you know, in the community that we're in, a restaurant heavy community, tourist community, I would think that would go to our goals and our,
Right.
and whatnot, you know, so that, but I think, I would like to go through these requests particularly and be able to ask more
So-
questions about them.
I would say just in this conversation and a separate conversation we've had before, then you also want to have a conversation eventually. Then it's like, do you just bypass the superintendent? You just have everybody come in from departments to talk to you about what they want this year. And so I think that we've talked about that in the past, that's a separate, and that's a kind of a separate thing. We're gonna have, and then, because principals, and it's like, how far do you go? Because then principals talk to other people who have their own opinions about what they want to
Yeah,
summarize.
like, I think CTE was one that we often heard from and we didn't hear from this year too. So I don't know, but I think this memo highlights some pretty important points, and I do think that we need to discuss further those requested positions.
Okay, does anyone else have anything else they would like to say before we?
I got one more thing.
Yes.
Okay.
Byron.
Because I don't know, I'm gonna be here next time, so, we're talking about the 4.26. I just want to put out there that, I don't know if that's what we're gonna get to, but I think the positions that, from my perspective, just this is my perspective, that I think, I'd love to see not taken out, of services from next year. For the school counselor at the high school, the French teacher at the high school, the tech ed at the middle school, and the TTE position, though I don't know the architecture, I think we talked about building trades. I'd love to see that as a focus for that pool of funds. So those are the things that are like the most important as far as like I'm concerned, like what's on this list.
So you would rather see building trades instead of architecture? Okay. We can talk about that on Tuesday.
So just in terms of, I would say in terms of our ability to create and deliver a building trades program within the requirements of the state by next year.
Okay, no, I'm just,
So
I just like the point I'm trying to make is that, if I don't want to lose the funds that are in that area. And, that's the direction like this is going to go. I recognize, yeah. But I
think what's difficult, I mean, I think this is what's gonna be challenging, what is challenging, because of where we are and where we've been, is if we get into. This is a menu of items.
Yeah.
I like 1, 4, 7, 9.
So we,
And it's like, and what,
kind of what we did last year, though.
and,
Menu.
well, I know, and it's just like to what, like where.
But I think we need to know how many kids are in architecture and how many kids might be looking for the program come their senior, junior year that have already started it. So how many kids are we letting down? I think we need to know, or is the council letting down by not giving us our full budget? I think the community needs to see the bigger picture. And I do think community members are, you know, from the chatter I hear at the breakfast joints that I go to sometimes in the morning, there are community members talking about why, Kate Cook coming in here and giving her spiel, and what is the council doing, and why are they dipping their hand in, and what is being requested, and how is this go? So I do think that there needs to be there is that public dialogue going on, and I think there needs to be a solid public presentation about this is what we're losing. If you don't give us what we want, and if you give us what we want, this is what we're gaining.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Yes, Carrie.
And Zach, I know this is like a hard thing to hear say both probably, but I mean, I totally understand that authority and slipping us then going through this.
Yeah.
I think though, in this context, I don't think the consensus of the board has been settling at 2.9.
Right.
And so with that sort of being an option that the administration came in with, that leaves us scrambling we're not
Agreed.
comfortable with that. So I just want to put that out there. That
No.
I
And so
don't- in principle, I totally see your
totally-
point.
I just want to make sure that and we're in a challenging spot. I'm saying, and it's not a criticism of like indicating preference based on what's in front of you. So based on something you've heard in the community or based on your own experience in life, based on people that were important to you in your school experience, and a desire to not take less from the city council. I think we're in a tough moment right now tonight to be trying to make some kind of abstract choices about what we would keep or what we wouldn't, without my team trying their best to try to provide you, if you're moving in that direction, to provide you guidance around this is our best advice, and then you have line item control, do what you want.
So
So
on that, I guess, like, and I think that I have been comfortable. I feel like the conversation has been had, the information has been available on all of the positions that were not put in. I would, in light of what you're saying, be more comfortable with just looking at these positions. I do feel like the elimination of these positions is really based on who retired and not a strategic move. So if that would be more comfortable to have guidance of a midway point between, 2.9 and loss of 8 positions, I think that's where I would rather have that conversation, being mindful of the process that has come up than return to information we've already had for months.
I would just add that this is why I think what Liz is bringing up is important though, because these were arbitrary eliminations. They weren't deliberate choices that we said, this is a position we want to eliminate. So I think we do need to compare to what has been asked for and say, well, is it more important that we put, an extra special educator at John Darrow than it is to bring back the French teacher, whatever. That's an arbitrary example, but I do think we have to open up the conversation to that because we have lost these people based on their own selection and not on the strategic selection of what positions should go.
So I will say in the aftermath of people who took buyouts. So we have scenarios that were, if we had to hit 2.9 plus COLA, we had worked out a scenario for what that was. I'm not sharing that scenario because for obvious reasons. We had a zero scenario. We needed a zero. It was zero because I needed to be able to not try to create that on the fly if we were in a position. And I needed to be able to say broadly, this is the number of people it would require. It was not exclusively teaching staff. It was programs. It was other categories of employees in order to get to some of those numbers. So we had those scenarios that we have been sharing those back and forth with the leadership team, and talking through what can you get through with and without. And then in light of the buyouts, we also then went through another process. So we had an existing list, and how does this affect? And so we went back through and it was like, and again, it was within the confines of a conversation about trying to hit a particular proposal. But these are all conversations we went back through post buyout, and we're having dialogue with all the different players. Okay, this person now has been bought out. Is this one that we would keep? Or does this one you need, you need me to rehire this? Or are we going to the other person on the list that you can see? That may or may not be in your building in order to make this up. So this is not the decision process has involved post buyout has involved conversations with principals in relation to trying to adjust to those new realities. But within the confines of 2.9%, that's what we're trying to hit, without having to deal with COLA.
So that's the first I was not clear.
Yeah, this is not, we didn't just like
That didn't-
grab,
Which I know seems like I should know that.
That's an automatic.
But I'm just saying.
but I appreciate, I didn't articulate that.
That didn't
We have
come
conversations. Yes.
Okay,
I
we'll
think
sum it up with Lisa. Oh, and Eric.
No, I was just saying, I think that's what I kept trying to say is that the fact that it's not so arbitrary in the aspect of, like, if the architecture teacher was planning on retiring in a year from now, I think the trajectory of our administration was already planning.
Post architectural world is coming, right? Yes.
So it's not like it was something that was just
No.
popped up.
No. So then if we think that that's our future, you don't put in an architecture teacher for 1 year. Right. And then cancel the program the next year. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you, Eric. Lisa.
So I don't want to repeat what everybody else has said. I agree with most of it, but the one piece I would like to see, to the extent possible, if we are truly talking about not filling these jobs, or some of them, I really want to know in some level how we're actually transitioning kids who've started an academic program with certain expectations that is not going to be potentially met next year. I don't think it's fair to students. And I understand teachers retire all the time, like things happen, people go on leave for a variety of reasons.
Sure.
But if we're going to tell kids who are partway through a CTE program that it's over, or we're going to tell kids who are partway through French that it's over, I just don't think that's fair to kids. And I think that even if it's only like a certain number of students, like, you're not just gonna say, oh, just do like health sciences instead of architecture, no problem. Or just switch to, Spanish or Italian if there's no availability in French. And I understand that that's not the intention. But if the ask from you is for us to say we want to have fewer teachers in some of these subject areas next year, when kids are registering like right now.
No, if
Like-
the ask for me is totally based on 2.9. Which sounds like you don't want to do. So I have no problem stepping back from all of this and giving you our original proposal. And just take that forward and then we see what happens. I've expressed my concerns about what that outcome might look like, but I will push and I will take it through. I mean, I gave you a proposal that reflected what we thought this is our work through the fall. This is what we thought you would want. That was our proposal. And then we've adjusted to what we thought were realities we needed to adjust in the rest of the process and to make sure you were in a position to make a decision about how to address that process. It sounds like you have, which is you're not interested in 2.9.
But I guess
Which
what
is
I'm
okay.
saying is if you're asking us to try to get as close to that as we can do in good conscience with all of the competing asks, it would help my understanding to know, can we transition kids effectively in some of these areas?
So
Do you know what I'm saying? Like elementary, you can articulate. Some years we have a big fifth grade, so we bump up a
Right.
fourth grade teacher. We do this all the time. So that makes more sense to me. But when you're talking about specialized subject areas, it makes less sense to me how kids can have continuity in their education.
I'll tell you, we're struggling and we are struggling. We've done some work already in architecture and struggling a little bit right now.
And I think the
To know
language
what
is going
that,
to be a
to
problem.
know what that picture will, look like. I think we're not in a problem where people, I think that the conversation about French and the conversation about what is happening potentially with architecture students who were engaged in the program last year are two ones that we're still trying to figure out with a week's notice while everyone's on vacation. Right. So we're still working through those. We're trying to figure those out. A lot of the other stuff, I'm more confident that we have the ability to, I feel like we have answers for those in a reasonably clear way. But in those are things we don't.
French and architecture.
Like, I don't, if it's 100, like the 150 students, here's my conversation with, again, and I don't have to count, my conversation with the principal was, would we bring back this position? If, again, that was within the environment of if we're not doing, if we are bringing back that position, there's something else somewhere else we're not gonna do, right? And so in that conversation, the conclusion was, we don't have the numbers to justify another full-time French position at the high school. And so because we don't have those numbers, then we should be focusing on either the saving of other roles as part of that process.
We have the numbers more in Italian than we do in French.
So then even in Italian, the conversation has been around hiring a multilingual certified person. So we would not be in a position, because I don't think the numbers in Italian justify a full-time position, right? So this is part of it too. Here's the other reality of this is if we were to sit down, if we get beyond us, and then the conversation is, city council would like to see a class by class breakdown of the number of students in every single class at the high school. I think it's a difficult conversation.
We had to do
But-
that once.
But
years ago.
I've been in other situations where my school board asked me to do that. I think that some of those class sizes will be scrutinized, and it will be difficult for some taxpayers to say that feels legitimate to me.
But if we're committed
So-
to the rigor and the choice, there's necessarily gonna be students who go to a certain level where there's not as many
Advanced
kids.
physics is gonna have 4 kids.
Those are fine. You're gonna have.
And I know, since I know we're all trying to leave at this point, but even intro to computer science, which I know I already mentioned, but you need that to graduate. If you want Mr. Reynolds teaching all intro classes every single quarter and nothing else, then you're taking away from the opportunity for computer kids to take computer classes. So everything in itself,
Everything has a give.
yeah.
Everything has a give.
Can't be in 2 classes at once.
And
So
the-
either they're teaching French or Italian, they're
Totally.
not giving both classes.
Totally agree. And I talked about this the other night.
Just
That
saying.
in a high school, when you start to, if you want to get in a situation where you're like, every single class has to have 18 kids in it, then you radically scale back the choice options for kids. That's the impact. The impact is when you approach larger class sizes, but if you have classes that are not a singleton and there's 6 kids in it, then there are things that people are gonna struggle with, and so, so I think that's the other edge of the equation, and those would be the types of questions that we would face if we went forward with 5-6%, let's go 4, 6, whatever. Those are the types of questions we will get, because we got it from city council before. And so, and I have some concerns about how we would fare in that conversation. So.
I have a quick question too.
All right, can you make it quick? Liz?
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious, like, where does the process, where do we start talking about, like, is this strategic plan process, like, the idea that in this day and age, kids need and want more computer classes or digital design or whatever, or they want because every other high school is doing it in architecture, or they want because we're a community that has a bunch of restaurants, we need employees. We want to bump up the, when do we have that conversation? Because I guess I would have thought that was part of the strategic plan when I first envisioned what a strategic plan looked like. I thought they were gonna go in the community and say, your community needs science kids, your community needs this, and kind of gear towards jobs, because a lot of high schools in Massachusetts, they give you that option. You have a job when you graduate high school with a tech company or this or that. And I wish that we did that more. And
We
so
could do that in the future. We can't.
but I
do it
guess
right
I'm
now.
concerned though that the issue is coming up now where you have, it's bubbling, like, we need computer, we need the CT, they're requesting these things and we're just arbitrarily denying it because we're reducing the budget down and we're not sort of seeing the bigger picture here of what do we need and value as a
We'll
community.
discuss that at a future time. I can't talk about it now. What?
I just want to highlight something you said about this is our best attempt. You guys want to do it yourselves? Here you
No,
go.
no, no, that's not what
Which
I'm
is
saying.
not- No, I don't
No,
mean in
no.
a bad way. I mean,
Okay.
but I don't think that the guidance to Brian and Zach at this moment is clear. And so I think it's a disservice to them to not clarify what we want. I do not want us to re-pursue all of the things they have already summarized. I think my request would be if your conversation, as I'm hearing it, was based on 2.9, what can we do? What can't we do? How do we figure this out? I I would request that that conversation be more like, the board is not married to that, so how do we maintain our student experience?
Yeah.
And if what you come back with is 3.2 after that, or it's 2.9, I think that it's just that I want that to have the context. But I do not want to go line by line through each of these items, and I don't think we should do that as a board. I think that's not the process of trusting the business manager in that.
What we need is a bottle of wine. And we'll just
Yes.
slip notes with a number on it between each other until we get to the right number and call it.
Well, I think we can, I think we should do what we did in the past, Nancy. In the past, we had that one colored sheet that showed
They're gonna
what we're
give that to
cutting
us.
and what
They're
we're
gonna give
not,
that
or
to
what
us
we,
on
the
Tuesday.
extra
We're gonna
thing.
have-
I mean, basically, it's
Numbers.
everything we've posted and everything from the principals,
Okay.
and it's just on a purple sheet. Is that what it is?
Well, I can, I'll send you a picture, I'll send you a picture of the one so you have
Okay, I think I'll-
the.
It's already here, though. I disagree with that. I don't think that we should process that at this.
Clarity, can we just take like a straw poll of just like, what do people want to see next week? Because I'm worried that if everybody's spitting out different things, that we're not gonna have clarity.
That's
next
helpful, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Not a vote, but just like,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that everybody wants to revisit.
My straw vote is for continuing services, whatever that looks like. That's, so I would vote for a number that says that. That's what I would. do.
Continuing services, including student choice or what,
Well,
like.
I mean, continuing services, I mean, we're continuing
That
to show what we were
sort of that
doing.
original budget.
It's 4.99, and then, whatever the city wants to do with what they're saying, we're doing with COLA, and and they.
Reduction because of the buyouts, right?
I mean, we wouldn't,
Hires will be.
It's not
Me-
that much.
To me,
it's
that's
it's minimal. I mean, it's probably less than it's less than
Right.
0.1%.
what's your number?
So.
What's your?
Well, and there was some cuts you made. What did you say? There was like 150,000?
We went from 4.99 back to 4.64 through a couple rounds
Okay,
of skimming.
so I would be comfortable with that 4.64.
Or
Going back to the original with the.
Well, right now we're at
certain cuts.
4.26. What are you saying, 4.6?
Well, we're all throwing out numbers.
Oh.
No, right? Here.
If it's continuing services and a little more clear accounting of what the impact would be for these individual things that you're talking about
Right.
keeping versus taking out.
That was the 4.26.
That was the 4.2.
And that was minus the two elementary teachers.
Yes.
We got the.
But,
Yes.
but continuing service, continuing service would just be.
That is well.
4 actually, if we got 4.64, it goes back, we cut out some operational stuff that was continuing service.
Yeah.
Continuing service is
I agree.
4.99, that's what it
Agree.
is.
Yeah,
That's
so
continuing
that's
service.
what I would,
So what's the 4.6?
that's what I'd be comfortable with.
Okay, 4.9.
But I like what.
Nancy, I think you need to.
Are we going around in a circle right now? Nancy, we're going around in a circle here. It's Pip's turn.
Well, wait a minute. We don't have what we want to talk about.
We're doing a straw poll, though. So go,
We're done with the straw poll.
so you got to talk, Carrie, and we're going around in a circle. Because we're not done with the straw poll.
Yes, stop for a minute. Right now, we're at 4.26.
But we're
On
not,
Tuesday night, be quiet for a minute. On Tuesday night, we're gonna consider some other positions that we can discuss. We'll either add, which would probably add to that number, okay? The number that we originally came up with was 4.99. So maybe we'll get to 4.99, but maybe we won't, okay? Maybe we'll stay at 4.26, okay? We'll talk about it on Tuesday
Zach's
night.
looking for guidance on what to come back with, and we started going around in a circle about what,
We
each
don't
of
know
you
what
wants.
those other positions would add to the budget yet. So
That's
why
right, but
don't we
what-
do that?
Because we were just doing a straw poll and we stopped at Pip, and I think the rest of us need to say what we'd like Zach to come back with. So there's a
Well, how can we
consensus.
Do that if we don't know what those other positions are gonna add to the budget.
Can I ask a kind of just, I think. I was asking for a more simple clarification. Like, are we just talking about these jobs? Or are we also talking about those?
We're also
jobs?
talking about
My
Questions.
Stupid, however we're calling it, forget the percentages. I want to talk about these jobs and not these.
Yes.
And
Lisa.
do we have agreement on that? or
No.
agree? And I don't know if we do.
No,
Let's take a straw poll. How many agree with what Lisa just said? How many? Okay, Lisa
Well, can I
We're
speak
gonna
to that
talk
though?
about these and not this.
But can I speak to that? You have elementary saying,
Because you just got outvoted.
I'm
I'm
listen
sorry.
though, Nancy, we didn't even vote. We didn't vote. That wasn't even a proper vote. That was a straw poll.
Okay,
What
well,
I'm saying is,
I will, I will make a motion.
Works
No,
out.
I'm just
And see how far you get.
I'm concerned that we need paraprofessionals and we're not budgeting for
Well,
them.
we just said we don't want to look at that list.
But how are we gonna support our special education
Well,
programming?
we'll have to wait till next year. We'll have to wait till next year.
But there's IEP obligations that are stated. I think everybody needs to read this memo, all 14
Why
pages.
don't we have? We've already read it.
Anything about
I
it.
know,
All right.
right? Addressing any
We're
of it.
calling the meeting to a close. Thank you, everyone. This was tough and everybody contributed so many good comments and we're getting there. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. Now, before we leave, Brian has a story he would like to tell us. A really cool story. And so we'll.
You're making me feel down.
Fort, on a real.
Is this the fort?
Yes.
This is,
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it's just a weird story, but I'm traveling down to Fort Bragg, Thursday,
North Carolina.
North Carolina, because Fort Bragg is being renamed after my grandfather. He was a World War II hero. They had changed it. Went from Fort Bragg, who was originally a slave owner and a Confederate general, to Fort Liberty. And it was obviously the current administration wants to turn it back to Fort Bragg. It might as well pick a hero. My grandfather happens to be named Bragg. Happens to be a hero in Battle of the Bulge, and he was written about in Eisenhower's book and medals and a lot of stuff over there.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
going down to the dedication.
That's awesome.
So when you see him on Fox News or CNN or CSNBC, you'll know why they're talking about Brian French.
I'll be watching Fox.
It's all lost to me, the political part of it.
All right.
End of meeting.
See you all on Tuesday night.